our own family trees, our own stories from the broader celebration of Black history. This is not the stuff of dry history books, but of vibrant family stories told around kitchen tables and lived experiences shared by our mums, dads, aunties and uncles, grandparents and great-grandparents. And I know from our previous debates we'll be hearing some of these vivid stories this afternoon. Why do we celebrate Black History Month? Because Black history is British history. Because the lives of Black Britons are the building blocks of our nation, from the Roman occupation to the Windrush generation. Because history is never static. It is a story constantly being told and retold and retold over again. Because the voices of Black Britons have been so often marginalised and dismissed, ignored and overlooked. The racism and the bias our forebears face within the factories, within the boundaries, the armed services, the universities, the National Health Services, on our streets and even in our homes is made worse by historians brushing it under the carpet. And this country, this House cannot overlook our complex and painful history of empire and slavery. A key thing this year is reclaiming the narrative, and I want to pay tribute to all of the families, historians, scholars, teachers and storytellers who keep the narrative alive today. We have a duty of care to our ancestors, a debt of honour to the countless millions who built our economy, shaped our society and forged the nation. Madam I'll be delighted to give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and I congratulate her on having this really important debate in government time. The Black Cultural Archives, which I'm hugely proud is based in my constituency on Windrush Square, is the only national organisation dedicated to the preservation and interpretation of Black history in the United Kingdom. It doesn't currently have that recognition as a national organisation. Will my honourable friend work with me and the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport to ensure that the Black Cultural Archives has that status, recognition and sustainable funding, given the vitally important role it plays?
I'd like to thank my honourable friend for this suggestion, and I know that she has done a lot of work in this area. I know the Black Culture Archives really well, having visited it over many occasions over the years, and I am too concerned, and I'm sure that I'll be happy to work alongside ministers and her in terms of how we can look at making sure that their legacy continues. Madam Deputy Speaker, it was a special honour to join Mr Speaker last week in the Speaker's House to mark Black History Month. It was truly a hot ticket. It was a pleasure to hear the Right Honourable Member for Hackney North and Stoke Newington speak on that occasion. She reminded us of the terrible hate that Black Britons faced in the 1950s and the 1960s, and how working class communities came together to protect one another when the fascists came to town. Jewish communities, Irish communities, Asian communities, the settled white communities, working alongside the African Caribbean communities. I'll be delighted to give way.
Bringing this forward, I think it's only fair to commend the Honourable Lady for Brent East for initiating this debate in itself. But does the Minister not agree that the celebration of culture and heritage, and also their accomplishments, which is something which benefits everyone in our community, and that the strength of this great United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland has its foundation in our ability to be British and yet to be so much more?
I thank my honourable friend for raising this. I completely agree. And as I mentioned, I've seen in the past how different communities have come together, particularly alongside the African Caribbean community, coming to fight against the Black Shirts, the National Front and the BNP. Here are the shoulders on which many of us stand. Alongside Bernie Grant and my fellow Ghanaian and great friend, Lord Paul Barton, they lit up the path for many of us to walk down. And I don't want the House to think I'm only going to mention those of Ghanaian descent, even though we make the best jollof rice. Don't let my honourable friend for Vauxhall and Camberwell Green tell you any different. But there is one more Ghanaian person I must mention, as I always do this month, and that is Achaba de Serbo, the coordinator of special projects for the Greater London Council, who organised the first recognition of this month in 1987 in the 1970s. He has seen the Americans celebrate Black history and believed Britain should do something similar. These are... I'd be delighted to give way.
Here we go.
Let me firstly congratulate my honourable friend on her speech. She's doing a fantastic job. She looks amazing. I'm not getting into the jollof rice argument because I'm Jamaican, so there we go. But she mentions one of the founders, and he was a constituent of mine. And it's just to say, does she agree with me that it is no coincidence that in 1987, when Black History Month was first launched by the GLC, this place also made history by electing the first 3 Black MPs, including the Right Honourable Member for Hackney North and Stoke Newington, the mother of the House, Lord Boateng, and also the very late and great Bernie Grant.
I'd like to thank my honourable friend for raising this, and I'm glad she took the cautious path of not saying that Ghanaian jollof rice is not the best, because she knows it is. But I also like to echo on record her points as well, and I'll be also paying tribute to them later in this speech. These are our stories we hear this afternoon. And Madam Deputy Speaker, we have come a long way since the 1980s, when we first celebrated Black History Month. We celebrate the trailblazers today, and I've mentioned the first Black Mother of the House, I've mentioned the first Black Minister and the Cabinet Minister, Paul Barton, and I've mentioned Baroness Lawrence. But I also must mention Baroness Amos in the other place, who became the first Black woman to serve the Cabinet, and she's from my area in the borough of Bexley and inspires me every day. And of course, no one political party has monopoly on trailblazers, and I know that members opposite will want to mention the Black trailblazers from their own parties and political traditions. And since the general election in July, we can celebrate the most diverse parliament in our history, making this House look and sound far closer to the diverse communities we represent. Such representation matters, Madam Deputy Speaker. If the nation's children look at our Parliament and do not see women and men who look and sound like them, then they will assume Parliament is not for them or for them. They will assume the rulers are the one thing and the ruled something else. And I don't need to tell the House how damaging this is to democracy, how populists thrive, how democracies die. This is not just about ticking boxes, it's about ballot boxes. And I said we've come a long way, and we have, but the path to progress doesn't run straight and true. Progress can be reversed and set back. Social media provides a new platform for old hatreds. The scourge of racism is given new life through social media. Every one of us face it every day online. In our communities too, racism is real, and the struggle against it is real. And it's not just overt racism, but also the damaging effect of racism in our institutions, the routine microaggressions Black MPs and Black staff face every day, the hateful language in parts of our media, when the successful Black business executive is mistaken for the cleaner, when the qualified job seeker is blocked because of their surname, and when the political candidate is told, this seat is not for the likes of you. This is why this government is committed to breaking down barriers to opportunity as part of our mission-led government. Why we strive for opportunity for all in education, in work, in public life, in every community and in every part of the UK. I believe the government's wide-ranging legislative programme will start to address many of the injustices that scar our society. The Equality, Race and Disability Bill will introduce mandatory ethnicity and disability pay gap reporting for employees with over 250 employees. We will reform the Mental Health Act. Currently, Black people are 3.5 times more likely than white people to be detained under the Mental Health Act, and over 7 times more likely to be subject to the Community Treatment Order. We must urgently address this. We will also tackle the abhorrent maternal health gap In England, the risk of maternal death is nearly 3 times as high for black women compared with white women, and twice as high for Asian women. It is a grave injustice that these are the stark inequalities in maternal outcomes. This government is committed to closing the maternal mortality gap. And in so many other areas, the government is making changes that will improve lives. I mentioned the Windrush generation earlier in my speech, and we've been calling for justice for those treated so terribly by previous governments, and we've called for the full implementation of the recommendations of Wendy Williams' review. I've called for it in the House multiple times, and I'm pleased that today my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, has announced that the government will fulfil its manifesto commitments in full. So we will appoint a Windrush Commissioner to oversee compensation and act as a trusted voice. We will establish a new Windrush unit in the Home Office to drive things forward. We are interjecting £1.5 million into the programme of grant funding to organisations to support people's application for compensation. This will speed up and clarify the processes, which has been shamefully slow and difficult. And we will continue to listen to the voices of Windrush, to honour their contribution to this country and to seek redress for the scandal that has engulfed so many of them. At last, and after too long, the Windrush generation will see some measure of justice. I'm proud to open this debate, but I'm not satisfied with where we are. We have a long way to go. Yes, I'm interested in Black history too, but I'm also interested in Black futures too. And that's why we need lasting change, real reform, solid progress, and a never-ending quest for justice. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
The question is that this House has considered Black History Month. I now call the Shadow Minister, Mims Davies.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and may I also wish Baroness Lawrence a very happy birthday, and may I thank the Minister and congratulate her on such a positive opening, and how wonderful it is to have this discussion in the main chamber. And the Honourable Member for Brent East, of course, working with her on the All-Party Women in Parliament event, and delighted to see that this joint working between the front bench and the back bench of the government has brought this debate today. I'm particularly pleased to see the amount of people on a Thursday who are keen to be here, which is fantastic, and I'm looking forward to the contributions from across the House. We know that this year's Black History Month, the theme is reclaiming narratives, and it's vital for every member of society to be able to recognise the achievements and contributions Black Britons have made to our country and to the world. And all of us MPs, Madam Deputy Speaker, have some amazing constituents and friends who educate and inspire us, and that will be highlighted in today's debate. And it takes me back to my best friend from school, Genevieve. She educated me about what it was like to flee her country, Uganda, with just a passport, and what it had meant to her, and what it meant to her future to start from such a harrowing time with her family. You only need, though, to look across the fields of sport, entertainment, culture and politics to see how much contribution Black Britons are making, and we see it most clearly in this celebration today. And I agree with the Minister, the looking forward, the future is absolutely vital. But it does take us back to the 80s when my friend Genevieve and I met, was when Black History Month was established back in 1987. And not only has it grown in a movement, it has grown into real debate and reflection, and I'm sure this House will do it justice this afternoon to note just how far and different the UK is as a country now since when it was formed. And of course, in this place, we've heard from the Minister the historic movement of bringing forward 3 Black MPs to this House, the difference that it made back in the 1987 general election with the Right Honourable Member for Hackney and Stoke Newington coming forward. And of course, we we celebrate her being the mother of this house. And in terms of my own party, the oldest political party in the Western world, we could indeed be led by a black woman, a testament to the arc of change that we have seen. No doubt this is part of the trailblazing from the honourable member from Right Honourable Member from Hackney and Stoke Newington, and indeed our fourth female leader potentially. There is another one available. Other members of sorry, you know what I mean. Carry on. Other members of the Black or mixed-race heritage community have joined our benches as well, and some of them we dearly miss. Bim Afalami in particular is someone who made an important contribution in this place for our party. And looking at the chamber today and in PMQs, as the Minister said, you can see the breadth of representation. I think it's fair to say, despite where we are as our party, there is more to do, and we are all keen to inspire and work together on that. In regard to contribution on sports, you just need to look at any football match to see where Black Britons are making their mark, continuing, whether it is Sterling or Saka or Rashford. These are household names when it comes to the English team. I'm showing my age. I will come to the Honourable Lady shortly. I was showing my age by admitting I must declare my favourite is Ian Wright. Please do.
Well, I thank the Honourable friend for giving way. As she's talking about sport and football, I only think it is right that I also pay tribute to my own brother, who is a Premier League footballer, Bobby Reid Cordova, who is doing who is doing an incredible job, and I'm incredibly proud of him because of what he demonstrates, both not just on the pitch, but what he demonstrates in the communities within which he has served. So thank you.
I thank the Honourable Lady for that contribution. One moment, I'll just respond, and then I shall, of course, let the Honourable Gentleman in. I have a brother myself who I'm extremely proud of, and I get that. There's something slightly less competitive in that relationship sometimes. So I absolutely pay tribute to him and his work, and above all, his skill. Yes, the Honourable Gentleman.
I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way. Just if we are talking about footballers, can we also remember people like Alex Scott, who is a trailblazer on this subject for the women's game, as well as those from the men's game?
Well, I will be coming on to that in my remarks, as the former sports minister absolutely focused on highlighting the women's game, and above all making sure that sport is not niche when it comes to reporting women and their achievements, but above all that it is literally a fair and level playing field. So I absolutely agree with the Honourable Gentleman. It is, of course, a note of sadness that we need to remember that one pioneer of black sport was Alfred Gardner, who died earlier just this month. Prior to his death, he was one of only 2 surviving Windrush passengers, and he was recognised at the Pride of Britain, of course, for his work establishing the first Caribbean cricket club in the UK. And as I say, as Sports Minister, the representation and further opportunity, particularly football managers as well. If you can't see it, can you believe that you can get there? Was something that I was keen to encourage and work with the beautiful game on, and I absolutely still think there is more to do. So we rightly, of course, herald the voyage of the Empire Windrush as the start of the story when it comes to truly understanding, I think, black history. And I thank the Minister for her update to the House on what is being doing to support the community. Yes, of course.
There is one cohort that it would be nice to hear mention of from the front benches, and that is the black warriors who came to this country to fight in 2 world wars, and particularly to fight the Nazis in the Second World War. And I commend to people on both sides of the House with an interest in this the book The Eighth Passenger by the late Miles Tripp, which prominently features Flight Sergeant Harry McCalla, who was the rear gunner in his Lancaster and who flew dozens of perilous missions and survived, and then you'll hear about what happened after the war. So I do think we need to salute in both senses of the word those people who came to fight the Nazis.
Yeah, and a little further in my speech, I was going to mention a little of that, but I've certainly learnt even more from my honourable friend. Of course.
Thank you for giving way. You mentioned just a moment ago the importance of the Windrush generation and the Windrush story of starting the story of Black History Month. My constituency is one of the most diverse in the country and long has been. In the 1920s, we had the biggest black population in London. Often the story of black history prior to the Second World War is forgotten. Does she agree that we need to do more to celebrate and remind people and teach them of that longer-standing history?
Yeah, I thank the honourable gentleman. I think that makes the importance of today's debate absolutely apparent, and we on these benches and all MPs in this House are so keen to champion our constituents and what we know of it, and he makes it a great moment of that once again here. Let's turn to our NHS. 7.4% of people employed in the NHS are black people, and indeed, when faced with acute staff shortages, the government previously, of course, called on Caribbean women to fill those gaps. 5,000 were working in hospital wards within 10 years, and by the 1970s, two-thirds of student nurses and midwives originated from the Caribbean. And I think the Minister talked about, rightly, health disparities and the massive focus that we must have on that, whether it is around maternal health and the birth trauma event just this week where this was raised, or indeed around menopause and understanding intersectionality and the difference in terms of health. Professor Laura Sarrant described in her very moving poem, "You Called and We Came," to point out what we owe to the generations of black people who came from overseas and have given and continue to give the best of our lives and indeed food and culture to this country and indeed have really added to our labour market. And we know that the experience for black people in this country at times has been long and complex and difficult, but we know that the more we learn, the more we work together, that is changing. In fact, the first black MP is believed to be elected apparently back in 1767. The story of Mary Seacole, many will know, and her remarkable role in the Crimean War, which was something now, of course, we understand much further and celebrate. So that awareness that's been raised in the chamber today is key. And as my honourable friend said, in our darkest hours, we have turned to our friends to support us. And it's an estimated 16,000 Caribbean men stepped up and fought for Britain during the Second World War. 500,000 Africans served in both combative and non-combative roles during the same conflict. And in terms of narratives, one long overdue one to talk about is the fact that we as the Commonwealth stood together, 800 million people, against the greatest evil of racism that has ever been known, and the Minister alluded it to in her speech too. So we know that contemporary attitudes sometimes have maybe airbrushed too many black British stories and out of our history and our understanding. So challenging and understanding the narrative, I think, continues to be very important, sadly. Whilst we accept and celebrate the progress, I think it's very important today that we continue to challenge any complacency and reflect on the changes we've seen, but more that we need. And in fact, the appalling racism, Madam Deputy Speaker, and abuse displayed in the 2021 Euro finals, not that long ago. And I applaud and thank the charities and groups that continue to stand up against this abhorrent abuse. And there is an opportunity with the Online Safety Act to continue to work with social media companies to crack down on racist abuse, to make it clear it has no place in this country. And as I conclude, as a previous minister in the Government Equalities Office, at DWP and, as I say, in DCMS, a focus on young people and social mobility that your your postcode, what you look like, what your background, what your network was, should never hold you back. But we should be all continuing to work incredibly hard to tackle racist abuse and make sure that we absolutely fix those long-standing racial disparities. So the Minister has my support and my party's support on this. And I'm particularly proud that when we left office that we delivered 62 out of the 74 actions of the British Action Plan on racial disparities. As the Minister said, there is more to do. I look forward to the contributions from members present on this important debate as we celebrate Black History Month in this House, but importantly, we look to the future.
Dawn Butler.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's a pleasure and a privilege to be a part of this debate in the floor of the House in government's time, the first time ever. I want to thank the Shadow Minister for her excellent contribution. It's a pleasure to co-chair the Women in Parliament APPG, and talking about footballers, Raheem Sterling is from Brent, a proud Brent boy, and so is Rachel Yankee, and they do amazing things in the community. I want to thank the Government Minister for her moving and excellent speech. I'm sure the Nigerians would disagree in regards to jollof rice. I will try not to get too involved in that. But for being the first woman of Ghanaian descent at the dispatch box, I remember in 2009 when I stood at that dispatch box, and I was the first black woman to ever stand at that dispatch box as a government minister. It was so moving. I felt sort of almost the weight of history on my shoulders. So congratulations to you. And also for the Windrush announcement. That is a phenomenal announcement, and there will be a lot of people today that will be very grateful for that announcement. And I'd like to thank Wendy Williams, Jacqueline McKenzie, Martin Ford, Patrick Vernon for all the work that they've done around Windrush. Reclaiming the narrative for this Black History Month is important because it's not about explaining Black history, it's about reclaiming some of the narrative that is out there and changing some of the assumptions. And I always remember at school when the teacher said to me, don't assume, because when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. And I always remember that. And when I met Pam, whose family owned a cotton farm in Mississippi for over 100 years. I was expecting, all of these stories of uprising and everything, and she just told me how the entrepreneurship, the sustainability, the fair pay, and I was so enthralled by her story, mytunica.com. I was so enthralled by her story that I purchased this shirt that I am wearing today. And I want to thank my honourable friend from Luton North for helping me iron it today. The thing about business is it's easy, if you like, to make huge profits in business if you don't have to pay people, if you don't have to provide accommodation, if you don't have to treat them fairly, if you can treat them like they are nobody. And nobody with a conscience or compassion would say that that is a good business model. But 6 years ago, in 2018, I received a message, so did everybody else in the country, and this message said to inform me that we had finished paying reparations owed, and the message said, the amount of money borrowed for the Slavery Abolition Act was so large that it wasn't paid off until 2015, which means that living British citizens helped pay to end the slave trade. I was absolutely shocked when I received that message, and I thought, I don't consent to my taxpayers' money paying slave owners compensation. I mean, it was the British government paid £20 million, which was 5% of GDP at the time, which will now be equivalent of about £100 billion. And this money was paid to compensate slave owners for lost capital associated with freeing slaves, 40% of the UK's budget. So there has been a precedent, Madam Deputy Speaker, in paying reparations. for slavery, it's just being paid to the wrong people.
On that point, will my friend give way?
Absolutely.
Can I congratulate my friend? And the shirt is lovely. I have to say, but just on the point of reparations, she's making an absolutely vital point in that. Would she agree with me that whilst we absolutely look to the future, it's so important that we do open and have that discussion about reparations, because like her or myself, we are descendants of those that were enslaved.
I thank my right honourable friend for intervention. Absolutely. And I understand that the Prime Minister has said that we have to look to the future, and he's dealing with 14 years of corruption and mismanagement by the Conservative government, but we do have to consider reparations, because it's the right thing to do, because it makes you wonder, would it ever be conceivable that this decision would be made today? Like, would we pay traffickers for the loss of trade? Would we pay pimps for their loss of trade? I mean, it's a ridiculous assertion, Madam Deputy Speaker. So I thought to myself, who made this decision and how was it made? But obviously it was made in Parliament. Back then there were no women, there were no black people, there were no people of colour, it was just white men. And they made that decision. And to think that, it was just 9 years ago, so it's still very current. 9 years ago, we just finished paying. So, and why this British government hasn't disclosed a complete list of recipient individuals and firms of bonds related to compensation of the slaves, researchers at University College of London have compiled a list of over 46,000 current individuals and groups who have received government payouts related to the abolition of slavery. Many powerful British families, including current businesses and political elites in the United Kingdom, are among the recipients uncovered by the UCLT. So when we hear the argument that to make your money, to make your millions, you just have to work hard, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, it's not quite the full story, is it? So that is why the narrative needs to be reset, and structures created in order to uphold white supremacist views need to be revisited and restructured.
My honourable friend give way?
Absolutely.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way and for the fantastic speech that she is making. As she will know, there are a number of different people who are calling for reparations, including people in this House. There is an all-party parliamentary group for African reparations, of which she is a member. And does she agree with me that there should be a discussion about the different ways in which people want to see reparations paid? People have heard the large sums of money and they've got quite scared, but they haven't thought about all of the different ways in which we could go about repairing the sheer imbalance of equality that we created as a country by taking part in the enslavement and trafficking and colonialisation of countries, like environmental reparations, educational reparations, all of these different ways in which we could support those that we so seriously disadvantage. And does she agree with me that everybody should come along to the All-Party Parliamentary Group's conference this Sunday on the 27th of October if they would like to hear more?
Absolute excellent plug for the conference on Sunday, and I will be there. The thing about resetting the narrative is that we have to learn. And, we have to educate ourselves. There's nothing wrong in that. And there's also nothing wrong in changing your mind. There's nothing wrong in having one position and then you learn something new, you understand, like reparations isn't just about money, and then you change your mind. So I agree with my right honourable friend. I mean, at the end of the day, slavery destroyed African economy. It stripped Africa of its people, but it also stripped Africa of its riches. There's a narrative that Africa is poor because of corruption and we must help these poor African children. Well, I'd like to change that narrative, and I'd like to say that Africa is rich. Africa is rich in natural resources, ranging from arable land, water, oil, natural gas, minerals, forests and wildlife. The continent holds a huge proportion of the world's natural resources, both renewable and non-renewable. Africa is home to some 30% of the world's mineral reserves, 8% of the world's natural gas, 12% of the world's natural oil reserves, 40% of the world's gold, and up to 90% of its chromium and platinum. the largest reserves of cobalt, diamonds, platinum and uranium, and 10% of the planet's internal renewable fresh water source. So I want everybody in this house and outside of this house to consider the narrative that Africa is rich and it has had its wealth stolen. Africa also has a net contribution to the rest of the world. And as my right honourable friend has said, that there's lots of big, numbers going around, like $777 trillion needs to be paid in reparations, or most recently, Dr. Michael Banner, the Dean of Trinity College of Cambridge, claimed Britain owed £205 billion in reparation. Patrick Robinson, leading judge at International Court of Justice, declared UK should pay $24 trillion for its involvement in slavery. It's a lot of money, it's a lot of figures. But at the end of the day, some things will be easy to compensate. It's not just about money. We could give back artifacts. We can give back the bodies of freedom fighters, stolen jewels and precious metals wherever they may be, make good the land and seas ruined by oil spills, correct the education of history, compensate land for home owners, cancel the debt. There's lots of things that can be done to make sure we have reparations. And I would say that, yes, it is complex to calculate what is owed. But let's not forget that in order for slavery to continue, people put a number on people's lives. People were sold for money. So if it could be done then, it can be done now. And I want to sort of end on, I recently wrote a poem that I will come to, but the first Homo sapiens on Earth, so Homo sapiens, modern humans, is thought to have emerged in Africa around 300,000 years ago. And it's absolutely fascinating when you read about the different continents in Africa and the Middle Stone Age and how they developed different tools depending on where they came from. And the thing about this is it led me to write a poem about being of the first ones, which seemed to have upset, Madam Deputy Speaker, quite a few racists. And I would say to people, don't scroll on my social media feed unless you want to get upset. But my poem is this. So you wanted to see me broken, head bowed and tears in my eyes. More for you didn't realise my strength is powered by your lies. You are the wrong one, the violent one, the weird one, whereas I am the chosen one because I am of the first ones. You see this skin I'm in, this beautiful mahogany brown, this skin you don't like, I believe. So why try so hard to achieve by burning yourself by the sun? For me, there's no need because I am the chosen one, for I am of the first ones. I know I'm black and beautiful, an African freedom fighter. My skin is my protection because you, my friend, don't matter, because I am the chosen one, for I am of the first ones. So you wanted to see me broken, head bowed and tears in my eyes. More for you haven't realised my strength is despite your lies. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, no one should shy away from the truth, even if it hurts and it is painful. Slavery has always been wrong. That's why we've got the modern slavery bill that started in the other place. And we should ask ourselves that knowing the truth isn't the same as hate. This isn't hate speech, this is love speech. This is the way that we right the wrongs of the past and look forward to the future.
Yeah. We now come to the Liberal Democrat spokesperson, Josh Babarinde.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I pay tribute to the Honourable Member for Brent East for that amazing tribute and that awesome poem, and to those on the front benches who have spoken so far as well to celebrate Black History Month. I join in paying birthday wishes to Baroness Doreen Lawrence, and as far as the Jollof question is concerned, as a Nigerian, I will come to that later. Now, as the first black person ever elected as a Lib Dem MP, it is an honour to stand here to mark Black History Month. About time indeed. Better late than never. Now, the theme of Black History Month this year, as we've heard, is reclaiming narratives, and I could not think of a more pertinent time in recent history to be pursuing that very endeavour. Because people may look at what happened after Saka missed that goal in those Euros, after the riots of this year, look at spikes in hate crime and feel that our country isn't what it once was. They may feel that our country is unwelcome, is closed. But I say to them this: Britain is far more than the divisive minority found in some corners of this country and indeed in some corners of this house. At our core, we're a country that's open, that's tolerant, that's multicultural, and that is enriched, not compromised, by diversity. Now, Eastbourne's black community is a shining example of such diversity and such contribution, and I want to highlight some contributions from them today, not least because I was born and bred in that wonderful town that I now represent. Now, I won't describe my family because that's cheating, but I'll talk about someone who certainly feels like family, and that is Jenny Williams. Jenny is the first black woman ever elected to Eastbourne Borough Council since it was established in 1859. Jenny's career's work diversifying the arts, whether through the Arts Council or her organisation Take the Space and many other vehicles in between, has helped to change the landscape at a grassroots level and national level in the arts, and our town and our country is much richer for it. I'm also proud to pay tribute to Solomon Bahani, a fellow Eastbournian who's their inspirational head teacher at St Catherine's College. He's been an Eastbourne lad since coming to the UK aged 4, and like me, is a Hampden Park boy within Eastbourne, having attended local schools, and he now leads one. He's a role model not just for black children in Eastbourne, but for all children in my town. We then have Marie Baker, who runs Your Afro World, the specialist salon to which people travel from far and wide to experience the magic of Marie's hairdressing. She runs far more than a salon, though. It's essentially become a community, a space that's oozing with heart, laughs, conversation, the juiciest of conversation. If you want to go anywhere for gossip in Eastbourne, you need to go to Your Afro World. We've also home to the amazing Dante Hutchinson. Dante's a pro scooter rider who's a 4-time scooter champion and a 1-time world champion. He's inspired a generation of young people into the sport, and he does Eastbourne so proud. The last Eastbournian I'll pay tribute to today is Mibrak, whose tenacious work for Eastbourne through Diversity Resource International has supported black communities in my town and indeed beyond, I think, in your constituency as well, Madam Deputy Speaker, through research, translation and support for black carers. So I thank Mibrak today as well. But from my seaside home to this riverside house, there's much to celebrate too. This is the most ethnically diverse Parliament ever. And I take this opportunity to pay particular tribute to the journeys that those folks of colour, particularly those black folks, have made in journeying to this house. I want to recognise those who have sought to lift those black voices and bring them to this house too. I'm thinking of the likes of Operation Black Vote, the non-profit organisation that supports ethnic minorities to engage with and seek roles in civic life. OBV's Magistrates Programme has seen dozens of black people contribute their experience and expertise to our criminal justice system, and with it has enhanced our court system's capacity to dispense justice with fairness and equality. Particularly close to my heart is OBV's MP Shadowing Scheme and the Pathway to Success programme, which has supported so many to get a taste of what MP life is like, many of whom are now members, in fact, of this place, alumni of that programme. My friend, the Honourable Member for Croydon East, is one of those, and I am another. And so I'd like to thank the man, the myth, the legend that is Lord Simon Woolley in the other place, the godfather of black British politics, for his decades of work to help make that happen. And how could I forget our very own black fairy godmother in British politics, Baroness Floella Benjamin, in the other place, who also sits pride of place on Liberal Democrat benches. Now, within my own party, it's meant a lot to have been part of the Stellar programme, which has supported me in my journey, first as a candidate and then as an MP, to break through the glass ceiling that the people of Eastbourne smashed so awesomely to the tune of 52% on the 4th of July. I'm also proud of the Lib Dem campaign for race equality, headed up by Mohsin Khan and the amazing Roderick Lynch, and I send best wishes to him at the moment. And also the Lib Dem RDC, led by Chris French, for the work that they've all done to support black people to stand for council and for this place, with inspirational councillors elected like Nancy Jurira, Toomey Hawkins, Ade Adeyemo. There are so many more. And I know that other parties have their own equivalents of these schemes, whose work is super important in helping us to go even further in the next Parliament. But black achievement in this place does not begin or end in this chamber or that other chamber. I'm so proud to work in this building alongside so many black house staff, without whom I think we could all agree this place would grind to a halt overnight. Yeah. Now, there are too many to individually pay tribute to in just one speech, but let me just name two, and I believe they're watching because Jennifer King in the members' tea room has arranged for them to slip away from behind the counter and watch. And they are Margaret and Godfrey. Now, the first time that I walked into the members' tea room, I was a nervous, brand new MP days into the job. Then came Margaret, who knew my name, knew where I was from, and took me under her wing, literally. She gave me the biggest hug. Then swiftly came hers and Godfrey's rightful mocking that I, as a man with Nigerian blood, cannot tolerate spicy jollof. It makes me an awful half Nigerian, and Grandma, I am so sorry. Of course I will.
Really pleased that he's mentioned Margaret and Godfrey, and just to reassure them that there's lots of love for both of them on the Labour benches as much as there is on the Liberal Democrat ones.
I'm sure they heard that loud and clear. I thank him for his intervention. But seriously, though, people, the response of folks like Margaret, Godfrey and many others have made me feel more welcome than so many other things that could possibly have in this house. Their warmth, their humour, their generosity. So I'd really like to put my thanks to them on record. So this house has come far, but there is still some work to do. And I reflect on an anecdote that I have permission to tell that involves myself and the honourable member, my friend, for Huntingdon. It was week 1 or 2 of our time as brand new. Some of you can see where this is going. Week 1 or 2, when we were new MPs, I was sat in Portcullis House, and the honourable member comes up to me and says, "Oh, are you Josh?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." He said, "Oh, I'm Ben, and I know that you're Josh because 3 people have mistaken me for you already. Has anyone mistaken you for me?" I said, "No, mate, sorry." Later that day, I jinxed it because it happened. I then bumped into the honourable member. I said it was 3-1. We exchanged numbers. The following day, I received a message. 4-1. I was then out and about in my constituency at Airborne, which is the world's largest free seafront air show held in what is officially the sunniest town in the UK. And some folks may know that the honourable member for Huntingdon has a distinguished career in the armed forces. And somebody came up to me at Airborne and said, "Oh, it's fantastic to see you, great stuff, I'm really, really inspired by you." And I thought, "Oh, wow, that's really kind." And all the work that you did in the army. And I thought, oh my gosh, in my own constituency. It then became 4-2, and I think it now stands at 4-3. So this house has come far. The country has come so far, and I'm not prepared to let a group of unpatriotic folks in the minority of this country take us way back. But we've got some serious work to do to really take things forward. We need to address the disproportionate use of stop and search. We need to tackle the disproportionate levels of incarceration. 26% of the youth custody population is black compared to just 6% elsewhere. Tackling the fact that black men are twice as likely to get prostate cancer compared to other men is something that we need to address. Tackling the fact that maternal mortality for black women is almost 4 times higher than it is for white women, we need to address. Securing justice for the Windrush generation, we need to address.
Will my honourable friend give way?
Of course I will.
Thank you. I'd like to thank my honourable friend for his fantastic speech and to all the other speeches that have really struck a chord. I'm the member for Witney, and the Windrush flows through our constituency, through the town itself and through the rest of it as well. And the Empire Windrush was named after the river, and therefore many in my constituency really have a connection which they honour to that boat that brought so many people to this country. And I think many people in the constituency really remember that everybody was invited. That we, in this country, we asked for help at the end of World War II, and that help was given. And I say, in this country, too many of us forget that. And I think Black History Month does a great service in helping to remind us of who asked for help. And I also want to give credit to the government, because I think the Windrush compensation scheme.
Both of us can't be standing, and I'm not going to be seated. So you need to sit when I'm standing. It's an intervention, not a speech. You're coming to a conclusion, no doubt?
I would like to thank the government for their Windrush compensation scheme and improvements, and I look forward to them moving much more speedily than the previous government delivered them.
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention. His point is very well made, and I also welcome the news of the incoming appointment of a Windrush Commissioner to help address that injustice that he so eloquently discusses. So I hope in my remarks that I've illustrated by spotlighting the black excellence earlier what wonder and opportunity awaits us as we lift our black community. I wish to reclaim the narrative that a rising tide of racial equality truly lifts all ships. It's incumbent on us in this House, all of us in this House, to play a part in making that happen.
Yeah.
First of all, because I want to continue having my breakfast in the tea room, I wish to pay tribute to Godfrey and Margaret. And second, there's no doubt anybody watching today will see so many trailblazers of people making history, and that is a fantastic time for me to be in the chair to witness this as well. I now call the chair of the Women and Equality Select Committee, Sarah Owen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it is a pleasure to follow the first black MP for the Liberal Democrats, the MP for Eastbourne, and it is indeed a privilege for all of us to be in the witness. We've talked about historical trailblazers, but we are indeed privileged to serve alongside trailblazers like himself, so thank you. And before I really start, I want to also talk about another trailblazer. It is such a joy to be able to see the Minister take her place and her space at that dispatch box. I want to congratulate her on such an awesome speech, and it is long overdue to see a woman of Ghanaian descent at that dispatch box, and I think we can all agree, what a woman. And we are surrounded by inspirations, and it was a real honour to be able to listen and to learn again from my honourable friend from Brent East. And yeah, black fashion should be shown in its best and in all its glory, which is why I was happy to offer my very limited skills with an iron today. It's been a privilege to hear powerful contributions from colleagues so far. Black History Month is always one where I know I'll learn something new. I'll hear something from a different perspective. And I'll share a fire and renewed commitment to right far too many wrongs. Yes, Black History Month is a celebration, of course it is, but Black history has been scarred by injustice. But sadly, that injustice is not confined to the history books. It is the lived experience of many of our colleagues. It's the lived experience of the people we represent. And if we don't act, it will continue to be the experience of future generations as well. Not only are these disparities not only confined to the history books, they're not confined to one area of life either. From work to pay to education to health, all areas of society need to improve to ensure that we stop history repeating itself and ensure that equality is consistently aimed for and one day, hopefully in our lifetimes, actually delivered. We know of many brilliant Black campaigners who have devoted their lives to campaigning for equality in this country, from the Bristol bus boycott campaigners of Paul Stevenson and Roy Hackett to Baroness Lawrence. But we also know far too many have died waiting to see the change that they need and that they deserve. At least 53 people who were victims of the Windrush scandal have died waiting for compensation. Compensation for the injustice which saw the Home Office wrongly deny British citizens, mostly from the Caribbean, access to work, healthcare and benefits. And in the worst cases, were threatened with deportation despite not only having the right to live in the UK, but as has already been mentioned, playing an integral part of rebuilding our country after the war. As the Minister said, our history and Black history are intertwined. The Windrush generation should have been cause for gratitude, not scandal and hostility. Commitments to re-establish the Home Office's Windrush unit and appoint a Windrush Commissioner are of course incredibly welcome. We also need assurances though that lessons have genuinely been learned and any future changes to immigration law will ensure that we never see another iteration of Windrush scandal again. I'd also welcome further detail on how the Home Office is working with victims to speed up delivering compensation to those who are still waiting. As said earlier, and excellently outlined by my honourable friend for Brent East, Black people face inequalities throughout their lives, in healthcare, in employment, in access to services and opportunity, to name just a few examples. This has been, and I hope will continue to be, a focus of the Women and Equalities Committee. In 2023, the committee reported on Black maternal health inequalities following the release of data showing that Black women were more likely to die from childbirth than if they were white. The committee worryingly found that Black women were more likely to experience treatment that falls below acceptable levels, that lacked dignity and respect, and where the needs of the patient were often ignored. I've been lucky enough to meet inspirational campaigners like Tanuke and Chloe from 5 Times More, and they continue to work with Black families and healthcare providers to see improvements, but change is too slow. In his recent review, Lord Darcy found that inequalities in maternity care persist, noting that Black women are still almost 3 times likely as white women to die in childbirth. That is not to mention the racism that many Black healthcare workers have reported to have faced in their jobs and in their institutions. It sadly comes as no surprise to anyone that in any workplace, if you are Black, you have to work much harder to progress and face additional burdens and discrimination. A fear of discrimination can prevent Black women, for example, from seeking support from their employer during times like menopause, making it difficult for women to access appropriate support or have their symptoms taken seriously. This is a double whammy of being an older woman and a Black woman. The committee found that as a result of this intersectionality, the difficulties faced by women undergoing the menopause were compounded for Black women. And in September, I participated in a panel event organised by the Labour African Network discussing healthcare inequalities in the UK. And I was struck by many of the contributions, but particularly by the panellist called Davina Brown, who is a race ambassador in GMB Union. I'll declare my interest as a member. And a leader in the area of empowering Black women in the workplace. She noted that Black women face more criticism and insecurity in work than their white colleagues. In the NHS, the largest employer of women in the public sector, black women can be up to 4 times more likely to be involved in disciplinary procedures depending on the trust. Up to 4 times more likely. And healthcare is not the only industry where intersectionality of gender and race mean that women sadly face additional barriers to protections, support and progress. In sport, has already been mentioned, but black women are woefully underrepresented in popular Olympic sports such as swimming, diving and cycling, as are black men, leading to a vicious cycle where children grow up finding it hard to envision themselves competing in those areas. And as we heard from the Minister, if we do not see ourselves in positions of power or in positions of success, how can we envisage it for ourselves? We must have stronger pathways that specifically encourage black girls and young women to realise their potential and follow their ambitions in sport. In football, we see a much more diverse picture, with many of the current England men's team being from black or mixed heritage backgrounds. However, the way they're treated by the press and the public, a notable example being those players who missed penalties in the 2021 men's Euros final, show the huge risk posed to those who play at the highest and most visible level.
Yeah.
And in women's football, the diversity in English players leaves much more to be desired. And I'm grateful the FA are investing in reaching girls from diverse backgrounds, including through their programme Discover My Talent programme. However, with black and mixed race players held to much higher standards in behaviour than that of their white counterparts and at greater risk of online hate, many of us will worry for the way their future talents will be received. And talking about another industry, the music industry. It's another area where equality is desperately lacking. In a report on misogyny in music last year, the committee heard evidence that black women are often overlooked for promotions and have their qualifications questioned. How many times have brilliant black MPs in this chamber had to justify why they're here? Be told that they're in the wrong lift, confused with other black MPs, and even handed a handbag to carry. I would have hoped that it would have been different in an industry that is so much more diverse and so much younger than politics. So in arts and sports, for example. But even in both of those areas, progress is far too slow. Regarding pay, Black Lives in Music's data show that black women in the industry are on average paid the least and are paid 25% less than white women. That's shocking, but wait till you hear the next one. And are 52% less than white men. They are paid 52% less than white men in the music industry. Nearly half of the black women the group corresponded with said that their mental well-being had significantly worsened in the music industry, and a fifth sought counselling due to racial abuse. As a result of the inquiry, the committee called for Section 14 of the Equality Act 2010, which provides protection from discrimination on the basis of a combination of 2 relevant protected characteristics to be brought into force, as well as the introduction of ethnicity pay gap reporting. So it is very welcome that the new Labour government has committed to introducing both measures, and we look forward to scrutinising progress in the year ahead. But any update the Minister has on these 2 vital commitments on ethnicity pay gap reporting and intersectionality and protections would always be welcome. And that is where I want to end, Madam Deputy Speaker, on hope. On the hope that things will not always stay the same, that we can move forward together. Because as Cherise Beaumont, Chief Executive of Black Lives in Music, told the committee, unless we break or tackle racial discrimination, we cannot really tackle everything else.
Ben Obese-Jecty.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you that somebody can recognise the difference between myself and my honourable friend, the member for Eastbourne. I do not like talking about race. I don't like talking about the colour of someone's skin, complete with the innuendo that often accompanies it. Not because it's awkward, not for any lack of pride or identity, simply because it is so rare for the context to be positive, as well as the inevitable abuse from those on the left that follow any contribution from this side of the House. Sometimes the distance between the 2 sides of this chamber is far greater than just 2 sword lengths. My father met my mother in 1969 as teenagers. He, the son of the stool chief of Aparedi Akuapem, Nana Oboni Ayem Nyako III. Sorry, Hansard. She, a white girl from West Sussex who worked in the local bank. Neither of them were toolmakers or worked for the NHS, but I doubt you'll be surprised to learn that 1969 was not the cultural epoch of interracial relationships. It was hard, much harder than anything I've ever had to go through. They faced prejudice that I could never imagine. But, as one might expect, they had the strength to persevere, and I'm hugely proud of them, because they are still together. And this Christmas Eve, it'll be 55 years since they met, and they are still going strong. They blazed a trail that I've been able to follow, and thousands like me. They never asked for any recognition, nor, I'm sure, expected to receive any, but they absolutely grizzed it out, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I wouldn't be stood here today if they had not lasted the course. Reclaiming the narrative started with stories like theirs and others like theirs. But too often, we talk about life as a Black Briton through the filter of injustice. We obsess over slavery and reparations, over grievances and microaggressions, over systemic and institutional racism. We unintentionally drip-feed an invective of nihilistic victimhood and exculpable underachievement, and then wonder why some find it so easy to look down upon the black population, and some within it are so unwilling to do their share of the heavy lifting. We risk reinforcing a them and us narrative which tells Black Britons that they are second-class citizens. We lazily accept a media landscape that revels in promoting the very worst aspects of black culture, repeatedly valorising criminality and violent gangs, exploiting negative stereotypes for commercial gain, without ever really holding the companies who happily do so to account. It is one of the contributing factors to the milieu that feeds concerns around stop and search on the one hand, and children carrying knives on the other. It is for all of us in this House to reclaim that narrative, recognising that the narrative is not the historic one that we are saddled with, but a current one that we are voluntarily yoked to. We have a responsibility in this House, whether we like it or not, to be role models for those that follow us. For we who have the confidence, or the talent, or the simple good fortune to find ourselves in this place have shown that race need no longer be a barrier to success. We must recognise that. Reclaiming the narrative starts with those of us who are privileged enough to be a visible representation of what is possible. Not through all black shortlists or well-meaning but clumsily implemented pushes to increase diversity that inevitably come at someone else's expense, but because we earned it. I would never want to think that my success was in any way manufactured because somebody took pity on me because I'm not white. Nor would I want that for anybody else either. On this side of the House, being black doesn't stop you from being selected in a rural Conservative seat, or being the London mayoral candidate, or running for the leadership of the most successful political party in the world, historically. I am hugely proud to be British, to have served in the British Army, to be here now on the green benches, and I would hope that others can feel that this country is one that they are proud to serve too. Generously, I will leave the last word to the party opposite, and in particular to the words of the first black Cabinet Minister, Lord Burton, upon his promotion to Chief Secretary to the Treasury. My colour is part of me, but I do not choose to be defined by my colour. As somebody who does not like to talk about their race, that is one sentiment makes that gap a little less than two swords.
We now come to a maiden speech, Liam Conlon.
And thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And may I congratulate the Right Honourable Member for Erith and Thamesmead, who's been a friend of mine for many, many years, on securing this debate today. The first time we've had a Black History Month debate in government time. We're incredibly proud of you and everything you're doing. Also like to thank the contributions that have been made so far today as well from the Honourable Members for Brent East, Eastbourne, Luton North, Huntingdon. Thank you very much for the brilliant contributions you've made here today as well. Madam Speaker, it's an honour to make my maiden speech in Black History Month, and I know that this debate will be welcomed by many of my constituents in Beckenham and Penge. We're proud of notable locals such as former children's TV presenter Baroness Benjamin of Beckenham, Windrush lawyer and campaigner Jacqueline Mackenzie, and my friend Michelle de Leon, the CEO and founder of World Afro Day. Madam Deputy Speaker, Beckenham and Penge is a new constituency, so I have two predecessors I'd like to thank. Colonel Bob Stewart served Beckenham for 14 years. He also served our country as the commander of UN forces in Bosnia, where he was deservedly awarded the Distinguished Service Honour. I'd like to extend my very best wishes to Bob and his family. And I'd also like to thank my good friend, the Right Honourable Member for Lewisham West and East Dulwich. She has served our communities in Penge, Clockhouse and Crystal Palace with an unrivalled dedication for the past 7 years and leaves a strong legacy I will strive to build on. And it would be remiss of me to mention one of the Reeves sisters, without paying tribute to our new Chancellor, the first female Chancellor. The Chancellor and Right Honourable Member for Lewisham West and East Dulwich both attended Cater Park School for Girls in Penge. When I visit local schools, I always talk about them. They are an inspiration to so many girls and young women in our constituency, and we are incredibly proud of them. Madam Deputy Speaker, when Colonel Bob Stewart made his maiden speech, he described Beckenham by saying, "Politically, it is a fabulous place. It has been a Tory hotbed forever." And once upon a time, that was true. We count John Major amongst our former residents. But 14 years on, I'm delighted to update the House. It is, in fact, the Labour Party with the strongest connections to my constituency today. Beckenham and Penge is home to not one, but two former General Secretaries of the Labour Party, who oversaw two of our greatest victories in 1997 and 2024, respectively. Lord Tom Sawyer and the mighty David Evans. We also have the longest-serving chair of the Parliamentary Labour Party, Lord Cryer, and a former General Secretary of the Trades Union Congress, my good friend, Lord Monks. And I can tell you that as a candidate, knowing every single one of those people is watching you is one way to keep you out campaigning in all weathers. Madam Deputy Speaker, Beckenham and Penge brings together a rich tapestry of distinct and diverse communities. It stretches from the SE20 postcode in Crystal Palace, the spiritual home of UK athletics, where no fewer than 19 world records have been set, the historic park with its Grade 1 listed dinosaurs, and Crystal Palace Bowl, where Bob Marley played his largest ever UK gig. And it runs all the way through to the beautiful BR postcodes of Shortlands, West Wickham and Beckenham, where former local resident David Bowie launched his music career. And as someone who is incredibly proud of their London Irish identity, it is very special to represent the only place in London with a Gaelic place name, Penge, meaning edge of the woods. And coming back briefly to this debate today, there has always been a lot of solidarity between the Irish and Caribbean and African communities in London. They encountered a shared experience of dedication when, as it was mentioned earlier, they were invited to this country to staff our NHS, to build our roads, to help make our country the great place it is to live. And were met often with discrimination, including signs on windows that read "No dogs, no blacks, no Irish." That shared experience of living on the edge of society and the trauma that comes with it, but found solidarity between those communities. And that solidarity is important, and it represents the best of Labour values too. Madam Deputy Speaker, each place and community in Beckenham and Penge has its own story and history to tell. But whilst our communities are diverse and distinct, we are also connected and united by shared values of solidarity and care. A belief that everyone should be able to fulfil their potential and that we are stronger together than we are alone. And they are the values that shape my political outlook too. They come from an understanding of society that is rooted in my experience of the NHS as a teenager and of disability ever since. So let me tell you what happened to me. When I was 13, the day after we'd broken up for the summer holidays in Year 8, I had an accident in which I shattered my right hip, which led to irreversible damage to my knee and spine. From that point onwards, I was unable to walk for 4 years. I was taken to the Royal London Hospital and then later the National Orthopaedic Hospital. At the Royal London, I was incredibly fortunate to have been placed in the care of Dr. Mark Patterson, one of the best orthopaedic paediatric consultants in the country. Mark performed nearly 10 major surgeries on me as a teenager, and I was then transferred to the National Orthopaedic Hospital, where, as a sixth former, I became one of the youngest people in Britain to have a hip replacement. Throughout those years, I spent nearly as much time on NHS children's wards as I did in the school classroom. So much so that I had to drop most of my GCSEs to focus on my core subjects, and I was then forced to go back a year at school. Madam Deputy Speaker, every year hundreds of children in Britain are admitted to long-term care in NHS hospitals, just like I was. But whilst in many ways a grim reality, my experience of NHS children's wards, especially the Grosvenor B ward at the Royal London Hospital, was that they are also places of great hope, deep compassion and world-class care. So today I want to say thank you to the countless NHS staff and volunteers who helped me throughout those years. They quite literally got me back on my feet and paved the way for me to become the first in my family to go to university. To the consultants and surgeons, physios, junior doctors, nurses, receptionists, hospital cleaning staff, thank you. I will pay my gratitude to you forward by using my voice in this place to fight for the NHS, just like the NHS fought for me. But it was also my experiences of leaving hospital that have shaped my understanding of the world around me. I realised firsthand at a young age the million different challenges disabled people face every day and how invisible they are to anyone else. Today, disabled people are amongst the most marginalised in Britain. There is a disability employment gap in this country of 29%. Only 1 in 4 children, disabled children, have access to sport at school. And millions of disabled people in this country face the indignity of not being able to access public spaces or even board a train. I don't need to read a briefing to know what that feels like. It's why representation matters and why I am determined to make my voice as one of the disabled MPs in this Parliament heard. Madam Deputy Speaker, I hope when my successor comes to make their maiden speech, Beckenham and Penge will be an even better place to live. Our NHS and public services will be available to everyone whenever they need them, and we will be living in a society which is fairer and more inclusive for disabled people, and in a country that recognises its diversity as a strength to be celebrated and championed. I will work hard to make those things happen for as long as I am lucky enough to represent my community here. Thank you.
Well, that was a very, very memorable maiden speech. And now come to Sean Berry.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm very grateful to be called to speak in this debate. And like others, I thank the Minister for her commitment to further action on redress for the Windrush scandal. And I also commend the Commonwealth nations who are making sure that there is a conversation internationally about redress and action on reparations for the transatlantic trade in trafficked and enslaved Africans too. And I applaud the member for Brent East for her powerful arguments on that point earlier on. I am taking the opportunity to talk a little bit about Brighton today, particularly the Brighton and Hove Black History Group. It was formally launched in 2002. It's now a thriving team of local volunteers from very diverse cultural backgrounds, and it owes its existence to the passion and dedication of Bert Williams, MBE, who has spent so much of his retired life researching and presenting the multicultural history of our city. The Brighton and Hove Black History website is an amazing resource for finding out about the impact black residents have had on the city throughout its whole history, and it's full of beautifully presented photographs. Everyone should go and visit. And there's a lot to celebrate about Brighton today and the way that Brighton looks at its history, including its black history. Our Frory Books in North Road has been running since 2021 and was founded by Carolyn Bain as a safe space for black people and their allies. Carolyn was inspired to open the shop because, in her own words, I was tired of going to bookstores and having to search for ages to find the tiny BAME section that had been allocated to black authors. Surely they deserved more than that. Afrori deliver anti-racism training to adults. They run anti-racist clubs in schools across Sussex. They have hair workshops, author events, women of colour yoga sessions, writers' workshops, music events, a book festival, so much more. And in Brighton, we are also very lucky to have the brilliant BME CP Centre, a sustainable resource centre which champions the black and minority ethnic community in Brighton and Hove, owns its own building, which is such a big thing for groups like that, and supports BME communities and their families in so many kinds of ways. I've met young refugees there and long retired Caribbean nurses, all playing their part in our brilliant community. And I can't not mention some of our incredible local artists, people like Aflo the poet, an amazing spoken word artist who uses poetry as a vehicle to address racism and mental health issues. We have Fox Fisher, an incredible non-binary artist, author, filmmaker and educator who is cherished in our LGBTQ community. As Jordan Stevens and Harley Alexander Sewell, better known as Rizzle Kicks, and QM Records, a Brighton-based label and events company founded and run by Ned and Nicholson from the well-known local band Normanton Street. I mean, I could go on. That's a few of our amazing creative people who are leading the way in Brighton. And now, in its third year, led by directors Carolyn Bain of Afrori Books, Althea Wolfe and John Mayford, Brighton Book Festival is a grassroots festival with equity at its heart. Their aim was to create another space in Brighton where writers from underrepresented backgrounds are the main focus and where diverse audiences can see themselves reflected. Now, in August, for reasons that should not have been required, I became just one of thousands of people who joined powerful collective action in response to far-right riots and threatened racist action against members of our community. As always, Brighton and Hove came together to say loud and clear that those who spread hatred, fear, fascism and racism have no place in our city. As in history, we had thousands of Brightonians defending the values for which our city is well known. This is such an important part of building a better history for our future and confronting and defeating the racism in our communities. And we've heard so powerfully from other members, Brighton does face current challenges. We have seen the rise in hate crimes that has gone on nationally. We have hundreds of racist hate incidents and crimes every year. And the safety of black people in Sussex is not helped by the fact that black people were more than 8 times as likely to be stopped and searched by police than white people in the most recent statistics. Home Office data on the rate of stop and search by race found the equivalent of nearly 30 black people in every 1,000 living in our area was stopped in a 12-month period. That is not proportional. That doesn't help keep people safe. We also see strip searching of children. It's one of the most racialised tactics used by the police, and they are 6 times more likely to strip search black children. I'm really glad the Children's Commissioner for England has taken up the issue countrywide on behalf of children's rights. Every police service needs to take action to stop this traumatic practice causing further harm. I met recently with Stopwatch, which does fantastic work on this, as well as institutionalised racism in the justice system more broadly, and the Runnymede Trust, who are doing excellent analysis on an evidence-based approach to tackling the causes of the racist riots from this summer. We must continue to pay attention and do much more to make sure that all the ways in which the overt and systemic racism occurs and affects black people in our city and our country, this must be brought into the open and confronted honestly.
The Honourable Member give way.
I will give way for a moment.
Thank you so much for the Honourable Member to give way. I'd just like to say thank you to everybody for their contribution. I was wondering, would the Honourable Member agree with me that this week, when the Prime Minister was asked about reparations for slavery, he responded by saying he's facing forward. Would the Honourable Member agree with me that in order to face forward, we must know our past? And on that, would you think it should become compulsory in our educational system to learn about race, empire, colonialism and slavery. Thank you.
I thank the Honourable Member for intervening on that point. I absolutely agree on education, and as far as reparations are concerned, yes, the injustice, the echoes of this injustice, they won't simply fade away. We do need to talk about it and take action. And if I could, I would like to talk about one more injustice and finish by talking about Jay Abertan, who was murdered in Brighton outside a nightclub in January 1999. No one has ever been convicted for his killing. His brother Michael, who was there on the night Jay was attacked, has spent 25 years now campaigning for justice. And I've met him several times over the past year at community events and at a vigil on the anniversary of Jay's death. Sussex Police have apologised to the family about how the case was handled, but I know members supported my predecessor's early day motion expressing concern that Jay's murderers have still not been brought to justice. I hope that I can rely on the same support from members here for any action I take on the Abertans' behalf too. The echoes of this injustice as well will never fade until we take this action. Thank you.
I'll go to fellow Brummie, Paulette Hamilton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I start by thanking everyone who has spoken in today's debate? It is an honour to speak today in recognition of Black History Month, a time to reflect on the immense contributions of the Black community across the UK and around the world. This year's theme, Reclaiming Narratives, could truly not be more fitting. We are at a turning point in our country's history where the stories we tell can shape the future for generations to come. My parents, like many others, helped shape the city I was born in through their hard work and determination. They laid the foundations for me to become Birmingham's first Black Member of Parliament. Yeah. As a proud child of the Windrush generation, I stand here with immense pride and gratitude for the Black history that shaped my own journey and the journey of countless others. It is essential that we acknowledge the challenges we continue to face. But more importantly, we must celebrate the progress we've made and the potential that lies ahead. Last week, I had the privilege of hosting a Black History Month event in my constituency of Birmingham, Erdington. I was proud to stand amongst a panel of Black trailblazers who have broken barriers, opened doors, and created lasting legacies for others. Among them were some extraordinary figures, including Birmingham's first Black deputy leader and the deputy leader for the West Midlands Mayor, and her name was Councillor Sharon Thompson. The first Black MP, the Honourable Member for Coventry North West, Taiwo Owatemi, who was absolutely brilliant, and the first Black woman to chair the Housing Communities and Local Government Committee, Florence Eshelomi for Vauxhall and Camberwell Green, demonstrating the power of reclaiming narratives through their leadership. It is not just about the victories of the present. Madam Deputy Speaker, we must lay the foundations for the future, for future progress. And for me, the theme of reclaiming narratives is deeply personal. I absolutely would not be standing here as a Member of Parliament if it were not for the Black leaders, mentors and role models who have inspired me. One such figure, Madam Deputy Speaker, is the incredible Mary Seacole. Mary Seacole, a pioneering nurse and a woman of extraordinary resilience, was the inspiration behind my own decision to become a nurse, a profession I dedicated 25 years of my life to. Her courage, her commitment to caring for soldiers in the Crimean War, and her unwavering determination to serve when society sought to marginalise her because of her colour, because of the colour of her skin, showed me that one individual's action can and does change the course of history. Mary Seacole was denied a place in British history for too long, but as we reclaim our narrative, we recognise her not just being a footnote, but as a giant in the history of healthcare. And it is in this spirit, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I stand today to remind us all of the need to highlight those who have been overlooked, to rewrite the history books, and to empower future generations with the knowledge that they too can make history. Madam Deputy Speaker, Black history is British history, and that means it is everyone's history. The 2024 general election was a landmark moment, a moment where we saw the most diverse parliament in British history. 90 ethnic minority MPs were elected to this parliament, a milestone in representation. But while we celebrate, can I say, British diversity of voices is its strength. But while we celebrate this achievement, we must not stop making progress. The journey towards equality is far from finished. Our responsibility, Madam Deputy Speaker, is to promote an environment where Black history is not confined to 1 month of the year, but celebrated and recognised every single day. We celebrate Black History Month to remember. We celebrate Black History Month to honour. We celebrate Black History Month to educate. So I urge all of us here to continue to challenge the narratives that divide us, to ensure that when we tell the story of Britain, we tell it in full, acknowledging the contributions, the sacrifices, and the legacies of Black people who have shaped our country's past, present, and will shape its future. As we move forward, let us remind ourselves that it is not just the breaking of barriers that matter, but ensuring those barriers are never rebuilt and creating the opportunities for others to follow. Let us be inspired by the courage and the determination of those who came before us, and let us commit to ensuring that we are not the last, but the first of many. Let us continue to reclaim our narrative. Let us continue to build a future where every story is told, every contribution is recognised. Let us continue to inspire. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Bayo Alaba.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd also like to sort of pay tribute to all the brilliant sort of speeches that have gone before me today. I also want to pay particular compliment to the Minister, the Honourable Member for Erith and Thamesmead as well, for supporting me on my journey into politics. I do not come from a political background. I come from a military and a self-employed business background. So when I met the Honourable Member on a couple of sort of political engagements, she saw something in me and she supported me, and she gave me some good counsel. She even came out and campaigned for me as well. So I'd like to thank you very much for your support. I'm honoured to be here today representing South and Eastern Rochford and discussing Black History Month. The theme of Black History Month this year is reframing the narrative. To do this, I want to champion the contribution of Black inventors, Black scientists, Black scholars, Black literators, Black journalists, and Black innovators. I also want to acknowledge the history of Black military personnel as well. And finally, I want to talk about Black excellence in the arts, culture, and the creative industry. Madam Deputy Speaker, in celebrating Black inventors and scientists and mathematicians, and I know the honourable member for Brent would, as a technical person, would appreciate this. I give you Lewis Latimer. I give you Morgan Garrett. Lewis Latimer, born in 1848 in Massachusetts, invented the carbon filament which goes into a light bulb, giving us long-lasting light. Morgan Garrett, born in 1877 in Kentucky, invented the gas mask and the traffic light system, which, as we know, has gone on to save tens upon tens of thousands of lives. And coming close to these shores, Walter Tull, born in 1888 in Folkestone, and was one of England's first black professional football players, going on to play for Tottenham. I didn't say he was perfect. Tull went on to be one of the first black officers in the British Army, serving with credit in World War I. Tragically, he was fatally shot in northern France in March 1918. And even if we talk about the history of the UK, and a number of people have spoken about that, if you think about the City of London and the wall that surrounds the City of London, the original wall was a Roman-built wall. That was built by someone by the name of Severus. Severus was the first African emperor of the Roman Empire, and he built the City of London wall to protect the citadel of London as it was then. Again, that shows a number of honourable members have spoken about black history being British history. That is testament to how far back it goes. Madam Deputy Speaker, as we approach Remembrance Day and are talking about reshaping the narrative, it would be remiss of me not to mention and champion the West African Division, formerly the West African Frontier Force. Now, the honourable gentleman across the chamber mentioned about the commitment and the dedication and sacrifice of people from the Afro-Caribbean community that have sacrificed and given everything to the armed forces and the empire. The West African Force is testament to that. The division was formed in 1915, renamed the West African Division in 1943, comprising of men from Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone and Gambia. In their thousands, they were drafted in to fight in Burma. Burma, as many honourable members will know, saw some of the harshest and most fierce fighting during the Second World War. And it was the West African Division that was there, shoulder to shoulder, with members from India, with members from British soldiers as well, fighting the Japanese enemy at the time. It's also crucial to their commitment and ultimate sacrifice of the men be known and referenced more whenever we talk about the sacrifice of colonial and Commonwealth input into the Second World War. Madam Deputy Speaker, when talking about black excellence here in the UK, you have to talk about our huge contribution to the arts, film, and of course the music industry. Steve McQueen, a film director, directed most notably 12 Years a Slave and Lovers Rock. Internationally recognised musician Courtney Pine, who I've had the pleasure of seeing many a time. Writer and director and multiple literary prize winner Mallory Blackman, the person behind books such as Noughts and Crosses and Boys Don't Cry. And last but no means least, my childhood friend, Randall McNeil, also known as DJ Randall. Internationally acclaimed, Randall was one of the pioneers of the UK drum and bass and dance industry. He helped transform the UK dance industry with his style, skill, and personality. Sadly, we lost Randall earlier this year. And finally, being here in the House of Commons chamber with an immense history, I want to pay tribute to the mother of the house, Diane Abbott. Yeah. The first black woman, as we know, to be elected to the House in 1987, inspiring a generation and paving the way for many of us to come and to follow after her. As I draw to the end, being the first black Labour MP for South and Eastern Rochford. Yeah. And I say that because actually I was declared maybe about an hour before, so maybe I'm slightly being creative here, because my honourable friend for South and Western Lee also sort of was elected on the same 20 minutes, 20 minutes after me. But so I'll claim that. And we both came into Southend and became the first black MPs in that city. Yeah. Now, what I also want to talk about is, and the reason why it's really important to talk about reframing the narrative, Madam Deputy Speaker, is because too often history and black history is being shaped and seen through the prism of the transatlantic slave trade and the American civil rights movement. And so I really wanted to talk about the other parts of black British history in terms of the confines of how it's affected and impacted on the United Kingdom. Yeah. And so for me, black history, including black people and the community in South and Eastern Rochford, it harmonises history better and more accurately improving community cohesion and economic prosperity. Madam Deputy Speaker, by telling a more accurate and referencing the African diaspora impact on society better, we can do just that. We reframe the narrative. Thank you.
Yeah. No doubt the mother of the house we referenced throughout this debate. It's best not to refer to members by their names but their constituencies or mother of the house. I now come to another maiden speech. I come to Jacob Collier.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's a privilege to follow the contributions that have been made today, in particular my honourable friend, the member for Beckenham and Penge, who spoke so powerfully about his own personal experiences, and I know that he will be a great champion for his constituency. I'm honoured to be the Member of Parliament for the newly renamed Burton and Uttoxeter constituency, a community rich in history and diversity. Although there were no boundary changes, the inclusion of Uttoxeter recognises the proud people and industries that are integral to our area. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm further honoured to be delivering my maiden speech on this debate on Black History Month. This debate reminds us of the importance of recognising the contributions Black Britons make to our society, both past and present. In my constituency, the Burton Caribbean Association has supported residents for over 45 years. Its efforts have enriched our community and celebrate the heritage Black Britons make to our towns, and I look forward to supporting its work. As I serve in this House, I commit to representing the diverse communities across my constituency, ensuring that their voices are heard, their contributions celebrated, and their challenges addressed. We all have a duty to ensure that Black history is British history, woven into the fabric of our national identity, not just for 1 month, but all year round. It is essential that we not only recognise this history, but also address the challenges of inequity that remain. To be elected to this House is the greatest honour that anyone can bestow, but to have the opportunity to serve your hometown, as I do, is particularly special. I grew up in Stratton and went to local schools, William Shrewsbury and De Ferrers. And I want to say to the primary school teacher who appointed me to the school council all those years ago that she's got a lot to answer for. On the campaign trail, I bumped into many of my former teachers and school friends, including my former head teacher, Mrs. Hunter. When I've been campaigning since becoming the MP, a former teacher remarked, "I must be getting old, my former student is now my MP." So you can imagine how strange this must feel for my parents who are watching on today, who I believe, Madam Deputy Speaker, were the hardest working parents of any candidate across the country, and without who I could not do this job. They have been with me from the very beginning, quite literally. Madam Deputy Speaker, I come from a military family and I'm proud of the service of my brother alongside all who wear the uniform of our country and defend our freedom. As Remembrance Day approaches, it serves as a powerful moment to reflect on those who have given their lives in service to our country and honour the sacrifices made by veterans, current service personnel and their families. The values of duty, service and sacrifice are not just words. They are the lived experiences of everyone who serves, and I will always advocate for ensuring that they receive the respect, care and support that they have earned. I want to pay tribute to my immediate predecessor, Kate Niverton, who served in this House from 2019 until the last election. Like me, she is a Burtonian and also a former employee of Burton Albion Football Club. Kate used to manage hospitality and I used to work in the bar in the stands, so I'm used to dealing with difficult people, like the members opposite. I want to commend Kate's courage and bravery in speaking out about the sexual violence that she faced. For any woman to go through this privately must be unimaginable, but to waive anonymity and do so in the public eye to help other women is commendable. She undoubtedly helped others through speaking out, and I wish her and her daughter well for the future. I also want to recognise my Labour predecessor and friend Janet Dean, who served as the MP for Burton from 1997 to 2010. When Janet was elected to this House, I wasn't quite born yet, and apologies if I've made anybody feel old. It was Janet and her colleagues in that Labour government which gave children like me new textbooks, new play equipment, smaller class sizes, specialist support for more vulnerable children. Lots of this has now been unpicked, and it now falls to this government to give kids today the opportunities that me and my generation had under that last Labour government. Janet has continued to dedicate herself to serving the community and can still be found helping out in Utoxeter, particularly at Redfern's Cottage, where she makes a mean cheese scone. I'm delighted to be able to represent a constituency which is diverse both in its people and its places. We have 2 major towns surrounded by many beautiful villages. Our largest town, Burton-upon-Trent, is best known for its brewing heritage. We are still the heart of UK brewing today, with large companies like Molson Coors and Marston's, to independent brewers like Burton Bridge, Utoxeter Brewing Company and Tower Brewery. We often remark that there's something in the water, but in Burton there quite literally is. Our water, being rich in calcium sulphate, created the ideal formula for pale ales and bitter. So much so that many other places copied us through a process called Burtonisation. Members are, of course, welcome to join me in sampling the original and the best.
First round on you.
The iconic red triangle of Bass became the world's first ever registered trademark, and because of Bass's global reach, it can be found all over the world. But of course, you will spot it in the many wonderful pubs that we have across my constituency, the Devonshire Arms and the Cooper's Tavern being personal favourites. I will, over my time in the House, be an advocate for the brewing industry and our pubs that are a key part of our history, but also a key part of our present and future too. In Burton, over 15 different languages are spoken. We have vibrant Pakistani, Polish and Romanian communities. This mix of cultures makes us stronger and is in keeping with the motto of our county of Staffordshire, the Knot Unites. Yep. Madam Deputy Speaker, if you head northwest from Burton, you'll most likely do so on the A50, where you'll most likely end up in congestion, but don't worry, that's something that I'm working on with the Roads Minister sat down there. Eventually, you will end up in the town of Utoxeter. Utoxeter is a beautiful and proud town with a rich history in agriculture, manufacturing, and home to Utoxeter Racecourse. In the short time that I've been Utoxeter's MP, I've heard several quite strange pronunciations of the town by honourable members. Local people, however, fondly refer to the town as Uch or Utchiter, and I apologise to the Hansard clerks for the difficulty that I've just caused you. In Roaster, you will find the iconic Yellow Diggers of JCB, which is headquartered and has several factories in my constituency. I'm proud of the ingenuity and innovation that we have locally, and I will continue to stand up for British manufacturing in my time in this House. As this government puts service back into the heart of public life, there are so many of my constituents who go out of their way to help others, volunteering in food banks, youth clubs and running community activities. I've been humbled to be able to visit some of these groups, from BAC O'Connor, Serac, Burton YMCA, Burton Hope, the Heath Community Centre to the Community Church, and I look forward to visiting many more over my time in this House. Before being elected, I was a communications officer for Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service, and I would like to take the opportunity to pay tribute to all my former colleagues and this country's firefighters, control staff and support staff for the dedicated work that they do to keep us safe. Yeah. And I look forward to continuing my association with the fire service in Parliament. Yeah. Upon taking up my role in this House, I sadly left my role as a Unison workplace trade union rep. But it was with great pride that on Monday I voted for the Employment Rights Bill, which is just one part of Labour's New Deal for working people. I believe this, like the Minimum Wage Act, will be one of the landmark pieces of legislation of this Labour government. It will transform the lives of workers across the country, strengthening their rights, ensuring fair treatment and restoring balance in a system that has too often been skewed against working people. As a proud trade unionist, I will continue the fight for working people in this House, ensuring their voices are heard and securing the rights that they deserve. In closing, I would like to again thank my constituents for the honour that they have given me to serve them, and every day that I am in this House, I will work to serve them to the very best of my ability.
David Burton-Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'd like to start by thanking the Minister, my honourable friend for Erith and Thamesmead, for bringing this debate to the House in the name of the Prime Minister, the first time we've had this Black History debate. And of course, my honourable friend for Brent East for the work she has done in encouraging this debate into this House. And I'd also like to recognise those who have given their maiden speeches today, the Honourable Member for Beckenham and Penge, and for Burton and Uckfield. I hope I said that right. And everybody else who has contributed. And my stomach is telling me, Madam Deputy Speaker, it would be remiss of me not to recognise Margaret and Godfrey also. Madam Deputy Speaker, Black history is my history, but as so many have said, it's all of our history in this country. And the fact that this year the theme, as we've heard from so many, is reclaiming the narrative, celebrating those change makers, is not lost on me. It's needed so much after the riots we saw in this country over the summer. And I'm so pleased that that division did not get its way in this country, and that this government acted quickly to stamp it out, and the community came together quickly to stamp it out and say as one voice. My community came together in Southend, Western Lee, and said with one voice, division does not belong here. Yeah. Madam Deputy Speaker, if you will just bear with me for a moment, I'd like to share a bit of my narrative. Some often say that I am the human form of the United Nations, and I'll give you a little bit of an idea of that now. So my mum, who's white, her father, my granddad David Sampson, was half Scottish, half French. Then we moved to my nan, Ellen Hansen, who was half Cornish and half Danish. Her dad, half Dutch. Then we move on to my dad. Edmund Dans, his dad, was from British Guyana, from a town called Berbice. It was a sugar plantation town. Now, Edmund took up the call during World War II to join the British Navy, like we've heard from so many. And by 1941, he was one of 42 people who had joined the British Navy from British Guyana. After the war, he continued his career on the sea and joined the Merchant Navy. And it was at a stop in Liverpool that he met my grandmother in 1956. She was Irene Bedford, and her dad was a gentleman called Siân Beaufort, who became known as Edward Bedford, or Buffer, to his mates, and he came from Liberia. Edward arrived in Liverpool as a seaman. He was a sailor, and it was there he met his wife, Mary Kelly. Have a guess where she was from? Ireland. You can start to see how I now embody the United Nations. And he remained in Liverpool. And during the war, as many did, including the black community, he served as well in the Royal Navy. These people giving their service to this country, and that was happening well before the Second World War. Now, in the 1960s, when my nan and granddad married, my nan Irene was subject to terrible racism in Liverpool. And again, this happened in so many black communities throughout these lands. So Edmund had to give up sailing because he was concerned about the safety of his wife. So he gave up sailing and he took a job in a factory. You can only imagine in 1925 the racism that was given to Mary Kelly, Irish immigrant, married to a Liberian gentleman with her black children. Unfortunately, we all know that this discrimination and racism has continued through the years. And yes, things have got better, but it still very much exists. I, as have many members, have experienced this racism just simply because of the colour of my skin. The assumptions that have been made about me because of the colour of my skin are simply unacceptable. And it's even worse today as we see the effect of online racism. And my honourable member for Brent East has made very clear the impact that has had on her and so many others. It's interesting because I was brought up in a one-parent family with my white mum in a very white community in Liverpool. I saw myself as part of the white community. I didn't really explore my black culture. The kids in school, had a little bit of, racism towards me, but in the main, the kids at school didn't see my colour, which meant I didn't see my colour. And it was only once I left school and entered the world of work that really became prominent. I was very fortunate to work at the Liverpool Maritime Museum in 1997. I was an actor at the time, believe it or not, and I took on a small part in an exhibition about emigrating to the New World. They had a basement exhibition site in there, and it was an absolutely brilliant exhibition. And just next to that was a very small exhibition, a couple of maybe stands with some information, and that was the Slavery Museum. It was so small you would miss it. But by 2007, the Liverpool Maritime Museum had created the International Slavery Museum, which took up the whole of the third floor of that building. And I'm delighted to hear that by 2028, that museum will have significantly been expanded. It's a permanent memorial to the struggles that can never be forgotten. And my honourable friend for Liverpool Riverside is so lucky to have that in her constituency. And hopefully we can all go up there and see this new museum once it's built in 2028. Now, many of us in this chamber, many of us in this country, have never been subject to slavery or to apartheid. But that doesn't mean that we haven't suffered. And we've heard from people today about the suffering so many people have experienced. Madam Deputy Speaker, we mustn't forget the contribution that black people have made to this society, to our British society, to make it the great British society it is today. And I talk in particular about the Windrush generation, which we've heard so much of already. They helped to rebuild this country. They took on positions in transport, in domestic services, in hospitality, and most notably, in the health service. So I'm delighted to hear about the creation of the Windrush Commissioner. Those victims' voices have to be heard, and they have to get the compensation that they rightfully deserve. Do you know, representation is so important, and as a young black kid, I often didn't see that representation in positions like this above me. And we've already recognised the mother of the house, my honourable friend for Hackney North and Stoke Newington, alongside the other two members who were elected in 1987 to this place. They were the first black members to be elected to this place since the last one left here in 1893, almost 100 years, and that was Peter McLadden, a Scottish MP. And he was only one of 4 previous black members that had sat in this place before 1987. But look at today. 14% of people in this place from ethnic minorities, 41% women, and almost 10% LGBTQ+ members. So we are now a much more representative parliament of this country. And I thank my party. I know the honourable member for Eastbourne thanked his party for the work they had done in ensuring greater diversity. And I thank my party for the work they've done too in getting us to the place we are today. But regrettably, Madam Deputy Speaker, that's not represented everywhere. In business, for example, 0 FTSE 100 companies, as of March this year, had a black chair, a black CEO, a black CFO, or a black CPO. And black employees hold just 1.5% of leadership roles in UK private companies, despite making up around about 4.2% of this population. We've got to remove these barriers to opportunity. The glass ceiling, does it exist? I don't know, but there's something there stopping people getting through, and we need to help people break through it if it does exist. So to see the new Office for Equality and Opportunity being created by this government, and also the Equality, Race and Disability Bill coming forward, is a good start to getting there. I thank those who like to create cohesive communities, including many in my constituency of Southend, West and Lee. And just a little message for those who say, when are we going to have White History Month? Let me tell you, you have White History Month every day.
Absolutely.
It's in your school curriculum. It's in the museums. It's everywhere around you. We need the same for Black History Month, because we belong here just as much as everybody else. So we need to, Madam Deputy Speaker, in finishing, learn from the past to drive a better future. In this place, we need to make sure that the laws and the changes we make, that opportunities are available for all, no matter what their backgrounds. And I urge the Minister to ensure that equality and opportunity are at the heart of our government's 5 missions. Everyone should be given the opportunity to live their best life, their most authentic life to the max. Thank you.
We have another maiden speech, Jenny Riddell-Carpenter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's an honour to deliver my maiden speech in this debate, and may I start by congratulating my honourable friend, the member for Burton and Ooch, or Yoxter, as I believe, for providing such great insight and a touching story of the constituency. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's an honour and an incredible privilege to stand here today as the Member of Parliament for Suffolk Coastal, a seat which, for the first time in its history, now has a Labour MP. My journey to this place is in no small part down to the dedication and hard work of the incredible local Labour Party, an army of dedicated volunteer campaigners who believed it possible when few else did. They worked tirelessly with a dedication that has inspired and moved me beyond words. I would like to put on record my gratitude and thanks to each of them for the work that they did, not just in Suffolk Coastal, but beyond Suffolk as well. I take over this seat from the Right Honourable Dame Therese Coffey, who represented it since 2010. I would like to thank her for her service to Suffolk Coastal. I know that for Dame Therese, this election came at a particularly challenging time for her and her family, and I know that it can't have been an easy campaign to fight. Madam Deputy Speaker, I wish her and her family the warmest of well wishes. I'd like to pay tribute, if I may, to Dame Therese Coffey's predecessor, the Right Honourable Lord Deben, known well to this House as John Gummer. Lord Deben is, despite our own political differences, someone I look up to as a role model for what a dedicated and committed constituency MP looks like. In fact, as Suffolk Coastal was a seat I grew up in, I have many memories of Lord Deben from when I was a child. At schools, at fetes, at many events, it always seemed impossible to meet someone who didn't know or hadn't met the Right Honourable John Gummer. And to this day, he remains a dedicated champion for my constituency. He has been forthright and a vocal advocate for the environment for many decades and long before it became fashionable. I look forward to taking this work forward myself here in Suffolk Coastal, and I give a similar commitment to protecting the environment, making sure we improve nature, increase biodiversity, and do more to clean up our rivers and seas. Madam Deputy Speaker, when I say it is a privilege to represent this incredible place of Suffolk Coastal, it is a statement that I do not make lightly. For me, this is a deeply personal responsibility, because I'm not just a new MP, I'm also a local MP. Suffolk Coastal is where I was brought up. I was raised in Martlesham Heath, just outside of Woodbridge. This is the place that shaped me, and I couldn't be more honoured to now represent the community my family call home. Madam Deputy Speaker, you may know of Suffolk Coastal because it's home to some of the most beautiful seaside market towns and villages in our country. Beautiful Southwold, Saxmundham, Aldborough, Walberswick and Alford. These are just some of the places in my constituency that bring thousands of people to Suffolk each year and were backdrops of my own childhood. In fact, it's such a special corner of the country that it would seem that many members of both houses from both sides of the chamber have retired there. In fact, my current tally has 8 retired peers from both houses as current constituents of mine. If this trend continues, we may find that at the next boundary review, Suffolk Coastal is renamed Westminster by Sea. And I know why each of them are drawn to this special place. It's the same reason that I freely and frequently boast about the beauty and rich history of Suffolk Coastal. For a small corner of the UK, we've played a huge part in British history across arts, music, culture, as well as defence, agriculture, trade and technology. Southwold, now a magnet for tourists, was home to George Orwell in his youth. He, of course, took his name from the River Orwell that marks the most southern point of my constituency. We're also home to the most important Anglo-Saxon site in the UK, Sutton Hoo. The story of its discovery has been retold on Netflix The Dig. I recently visited the Sutton Hoo Ships Company in Woodbridge, and I was amazed to see the work that hundreds of volunteers are involved in to build a full-size reconstruction of the Sutton Hoo burial ship, a pioneering task to recreate an important piece of our own local history. Whilst my neighbour in North Ipswich and Central Suffolk can boast of being home to Ed Sheeran, Suffolk Coastal flies the flag for Benjamin Britten and his partner, the opera singer, Peter Pears. If Benjamin Britten and Peter Pears were alive today, they would also be celebrating Black History Month and using the arts and music to tell the stories that matter locally and globally. Archives, held in their former home in Aldborough, named the Red House and open to the public, show that Benjamin Britten stood in solidarity with the African National Congress during the pivotal trials of 1963. More widely, Suffolk Coastal's contributions to the UK are also evident today. We're also proud to be the engine of growth for the region. We're home to the Port of Felixstowe, the United Kingdom's largest container port, and we also boast of being home to BT's Astral Park, a national centre of digital innovation with over 150 businesses in the tech cluster. Though we're proud to host big businesses, we also have a unique entrepreneurialism that is deep-rooted in each of our communities. Across Felixstowe, Leiston, Saxmundham, Woodbridge and beyond, we have a strong community of business owners and entrepreneurs. In fact, across the Suffolk coast, last year we saw 54% growth in micro-businesses, over 10 times the national average. But for all its charm and beauty, there is much that lies beneath, hiding in plain sight in our beautiful seaside towns and charming villages. We have a send crisis, no less severe in Suffolk Coastal than across the rest of Suffolk and east of England. We have real deprivation in some of our rural towns, and this rural poverty cuts across all age groups. We have young families struggling with the cost of living, people struggling to access work and stay in work. And we have an older population, often isolated in rural communities with few or no bus services to connect them to the amenities and health services that they need most. Madam Deputy Speaker, next week is my mum's 80th birthday. But she doesn't know that we'll be celebrating her, and she doesn't know that I'm giving this speech here today, or indeed that her daughter is the MP for the place that she called home for so long. Madam Deputy Speaker, she has no idea that I'm advocating for greater support for the disease that has taken her from us. In Suffolk Coastal, we have one of the highest rates of dementia in our country. And I have no choice but to advocate for the fight against that disease, because I've seen up firsthand, close and personal, how terrible it is. 2 years ago, I had to make the heartbreaking decision to move my mum into care, to pack her bags and drive her to her first care home. I thought, and perhaps I hoped, that that day would be a low point, that it would be my own rock bottom in my journey to supporting Mum. But it was just the beginning of a year-long struggle to get Mum into the right care. She was kicked out of 3 care homes and ended up in hospital for 6 weeks, taking up a bed in a ward whilst the system tried to find her a suitable home. She lasted 3 months at the next care home before I started a one-woman campaign to try and get her sectioned. I wouldn't wish that experience on anyone. Trying to get someone sectioned is, heartbreakingly, an act of love, because you know it's the last-ditch, desperate attempt to get the help and medical support your loved ones need. Luckily today, that's all behind us, and Mum is now safe and well cared for in a care home. But the crisis for other families is still very much alive. Since I've been elected to this place, I've lost count of the number of times that desperate families have reached out to me with an all too familiar tale. Madam Deputy Speaker, it's these things that fuel my determination to make every day in this place count, to make sure I speak up for those that have been forgotten, left behind, or don't have a voice to speak up for themselves. Madam Deputy Speaker, thank you, and I look forward to playing my part in Parliament.
Adam Jogee.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's a real pleasure to follow my honourable friend from Suffolk Coastal. She gave a very powerful and moving maiden speech, and I want to reassure her that I will be in the trenches alongside her in the campaign and fight to support those with dementia and their families. And I also want to pay tribute to the honourable members for Beckenham and Penge, who gave a very good maiden speech, and to my near neighbour, the member for Burton, Uttoxeter, Team Staffordshire Hunters a Pack, and I was delighted to be here to listen to him. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak in this debate, and I want to start by thanking the Leader of the House for ensuring that it has been held in government time, because each and every person who lives, learns and works in our United Kingdom, each and every person who moved here to work in our National Health Service or on our railways, in our schools and on our building sites, deserves to be heard, to be listened to and to be celebrated. I'm proud to be British. I'm a proud son of a Zimbabwean-born dad and the proud son of a Jamaican who came to our country in the 1940s to help us win World War II, as many other black and Asian men did in the Great War and in years subsequent. And I'm proud to be black, a black British Member of Parliament, words that not even 40 years ago seemed that even 40 years ago still seemed so unlikely, so impossible and so far off, and I do want to acknowledge those who've gone before me. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm the first black Member of Parliament in Staffordshire's history. Following in the footsteps of my honourable friend from Birmingham, Erdington, who was the first woman and first black person elected after the death of Jack Dromey, I'm the first black man to represent anywhere in the West Midlands in Parliament. And when you think about the contribution that black people, like my grandfather, made to Birmingham, to Coventry, to Wolverhampton, to Stoke-on-Trent, to Stafford, it shows how far we've come, but also how long it's taken. Madam Deputy Speaker, as we've heard, black history is British history, and certainly in the context of our United Kingdom. And as we approach Armistice Day and Remembrance Sunday, when our United Kingdom comes together to reflect and acknowledge the sacrifices of all the men and boys and women and girls who went to war and contributed at home, I want to remember all those who left the colonies as they were then and gave their lives for freedom. Nobody here or outside this House should ever forget that we wouldn't have beaten the Germans on the beaches of Normandy, or at Gallipoli, or at Burma, as my honourable friend from Southend noted, without the bravery and valour of young men, black, white and Asian. They left their green island homes and the African continent for the ravages of war. They were on the front line in the fight against tyranny, against fascism and against hatred, and their bravery won the day. And for many of those who returned from the front line, our United Kingdom became their home. These black men and women rolled up their sleeves, they put their shoulders to the wheel, and they helped rebuild a nation ravaged by war. Homes were built, our buses were back on the roads, railways worked once again. Our National Health Service was established, restaurants opened and sold food with spice, seasoning and everything nice. Fabric shops and tailors ensured our country had some of the best dressed on the world stage, and our United Kingdom bounced back. So much more happened, and we as a country would not and could not have done it without the sacrifices and contribution of the Black British community. And Madam Deputy Speaker, that contribution lives on. 2 weeks ago, I was delighted to welcome the Staffordshire Black Business Awards, Network Awards 2024 to Keele University in Newcastle-under-Lyme. It was a wonderful opportunity to celebrate the incredible contribution black businesses make across our county, and I'm very grateful to my honourable friends from Tamworth, Stoke-on-Trent South, who's next to me now again, and Stoke-on-Trent North for joining me at that event. From brand new startups to long-standing pillars of our high streets, town centres and communities, black and ethnic minority-led businesses contribute more than £25 billion to the UK economy every year. And last week I was delighted to officially open and cut the ribbon at a new black-owned business in Newcastle-under-Lyme. And I want to pay tribute to Gloria, the owner, and her family for their determination and grit, and wish them all the best. Their new store focuses on African clothing, so I will be going, Madam Deputy Speaker, to buy some ties with my own money at the weekend, and look forward to showing them off in this place. As we celebrate Black History Month, Madam Deputy Speaker, we must also reflect on the promise of our country, and to think that my grandfather arrived here on a boat, and here I am today. That wouldn't happen in many other parts of the world, but it happened in this, our United Kingdom, and we should never forget that. I'm proud of my race, but it doesn't define me. It inspires me, yes, and it has opened doors, and regrettably probably closed a few too. But it allows me to show those who come after me that anything is possible. And showing that example and not pulling up the ladder, as some have done, is how I'll approach my responsibilities. Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II said she had to be seen to be believed, and she was right. And she set an example in rebuilding and repairing Britain's relationships with the former colonies. I wouldn't vote, Madam Deputy Speaker, for the Shadow Community Secretary on any day of the week. But it is important for our country, as the Shadow Minister noted earlier, that we could have a black woman as leader of the opposition in a matter of days. Now, if she does win, and it's not my place to interrupt on private grief, I hope she'll enjoy her role in opposition for a very, very long time indeed. I now serve with the highest number of Labour black men in Parliament ever. And that's wonderful. My two friends from the city of Southend, from Luton, from Norwich, Preston, Buckingham, and who's up there, and of course our right honourable friend, the Foreign Secretary. Now, it's amusing, Madam Deputy Speaker, that for all of my frequent appearances and contributions in the Chamber since the election, I've been confused for the member for Buckingham and Bletchley, who is taller and better looking than I am, the member for Newcastle and Austell, who rocks a grey suit in a way I never could, and the member for Luton, who, considering he's 15 years older than me, has definitely won that one. I take it as I had 20 down originally. I had to check with my honourable friend, so I wasn't to age him. But I take it all as a compliment, Madam Deputy Speaker. And like my friend from Eastbourne, I want to acknowledge all the black staff in this House, led by the Sergeant of Arms, who's just left the Chamber. Over the last decade, Madam Deputy Speaker, I've been a local councillor and served as Mayor, and now as a Member of Parliament, I've had the honour of attending Black History Month events in local schools, churches and community hubs. I've listened to people, and children particularly, speak of their lived experiences, good and bad, and to pensioners recall the stories of their ancestors. The overwhelming feeling I come away with every year at the end of this month is how proud we are, and rightly so, of the Black British contribution to our communities. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, there's been much talk of reparations in recent days. I want that conversation to start, though, with a British government that takes the Commonwealth seriously. That conversation starts by ensuring that we reflect on the legacy of the British Empire and our collective and complicated history. And we do that by creating a level playing field in work, health and education, by properly and effectively trading with the Caribbean and Africa. And as much as I love Australia and New Zealand, we must do more and go further. We do that by a curriculum that tells all of our histories, by establishing genuine and real links between our leaders, and I hope that the Foreign Secretary and his team will lead by example. I want to see more ministerial visits to SADC, to the Caribbean and other parts, because on those visits we can show the respect that equal partners deserve. That would go so far in acknowledging the contribution our forefathers made and the black community is making today. And it would show that this new government gets it. This, Madam Deputy Speaker, is a joyful debate, a hopeful one, and I've enjoyed every single speech, including from the member for Huntingdon, although a couple of things that I'll pick up with him outside of the chamber. It showed the best of us. Now, me being here wasn't inevitable, but it was possible. And the fact that I am shows how far the black community has come. Remind us of what we need to do to lift everybody up, and how we must all hold on to the age-old value that anything in our United Kingdom is possible.
Yeah. Sarah Coombs.
It's a privilege to be here to speak in this debate and to have followed such inspiring and educational speeches. And she's just left, but the member for Brent East has been educating me for a long time, as I did my Year 10 work experience with her a long time ago. Madam Deputy Speaker, when October comes around each year, it gives us a chance to reflect on the incredible achievements and contribution of the black community. Though, of course, celebrating the black community should not be limited to only 1 month per year. As the CEO of the West Bromwich African Caribbean Resource Centre said to me earlier this week, they celebrate all year, from Jamaican independence and Windrush Day to music nights and fiercely competitive dominoes events. I wanted to speak in this debate to recognise the contribution of the black community in my area of West Bromwich, Oldbury, Great Barr, Tividale and Rowley. After the war, Britain needed workers from across the empire to fill our factories, our foundries and our fledgling NHS. People from all over the world answered that call, including many from the Caribbean. They made their homes here, and the roots they put down are now very deep, and their contribution over many decades broad. The theme of this year's Black History Month is reclaiming narratives, so I want to share just a couple of stories from my area that speak to this theme. The first is about sport, and the story of West Bromwich Albion's 3 degrees. The 1960s and 70s were a hard time for many in the black British community. Racism was rife and the National Front was on the rise. Football was no exception, with games marred by racism and prejudice against black players and fans. Around this time, 3 players at West Bromwich Albion were doing something exciting. The Baggies, under manager Big Ron, were the first English club to consistently field 3 black players in their lineup. In the 1978-79 season, the talented trio of Cyril Regis, Laurie Cunningham and Brendan Batson were an essential fixture of every Baggy side. The sons of Caribbean immigrants who came to Britain in the 1960s, they were among the first black players to play top-flight football in this country, writing their own story of struggle, success and stardom. Although this might not seem like a huge achievement today, 3 black players in one team was unheard of at the time. And they were brilliant players in the face of the racism they endured, even sometimes from their own stands. At a time when racism in Britain was all too common, these players broke down barriers not only for black players, but for black fans too. And this week I watched a great video by Richie Anderson, a Smethwick boy, an Albion season ticket holder, and one of my favourite voices on Radio 2. Richie interviewed black fans about how much watching those players meant to them, and their testimonies were as poignant as they were powerful. Madam Deputy Speaker, I also wanted to tell the story of a lesser-known but no less important local hero. I'm lucky to know her, and she is one of West Bromwich's strong, trailblazing women, Hyacinth Jarrett. Hyacinth had trained as a nurse in Jamaica, but didn't much enjoy it, so when she came to England, she applied for a college course in hairdressing. She was the only black applicant to the course, and she had to persuade them to let her take the entrance test. She passed it, completed the course, and opened her business, Jarrett's Hairdressers, in Bull Street in West Bromwich in 1970. She ran that business for 40 years, and during that time she was a pioneer in training people in the art of caring for black hair. Over the years, her talents and expertise were widely recognised. She was invited to work with Birmingham College and London University, and she eventually developed a module on black hair that was added to the National Foundation syllabus for hairdressing. Hyacinth was one of the earliest members of the West Bromwich African Caribbean Resource Centre that I mentioned at the start of my speech. And that is where I first met her a few years ago. The Resource Centre and other local organisations, such as the Kumba Centre, have contributed so much to the local community and continue to campaign against the discrimination and disadvantage that Black Britons still sadly face today. I'm proud to have them and so many other amazing Black-led organisations in my constituency. I look forward not only to working with them in the years ahead, but to sharing their stories, championing their achievements and helping to reclaim narratives, because they have earned and deserve their place in British history. Thank you.
Natasha Irons.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'd like to thank the member for Erith and Thamesmead and the member for Brent East for making today happen, because this is a really important debate. I want to congratulate everybody who's given their maiden speeches, especially my honourable friend from Beckenham Penge, who is formerly part of the South London Massive, and I enjoy being here with him. And just to say to the member from Southend and Lee, I may give him a run for his money in terms of the United Nations being what I think to be the first Jamaican Jewish person to represent anybody in this house. I just want to, Madam Deputy Speaker, say that this year's theme of reclaiming narratives is a really important one, because the stories we tell about ourselves are what our reality becomes. And if we do not tell those stories, others will tell them for us. For me, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is about recognising our contribution, our legacies and our roles in this story of this great nation. Stories like that of my grandparents, Ruby and Egbert Napoleon Irons. Like many others, when this country made the call for help, they answered, swapping the sun-soaked parish of St Thomas in Jamaica for the Henry Prince estate in Osfield. Theirs, like many in their generation, is a story of hard work, public service and sacrifice. My grandmother was a district nurse and my grandfather was a painter decorator. So they literally came here to rebuild this country and play their part in its future. They are sadly no longer with us, but I hope that they are proud to know that their legacy has meant that Croydon now has its first black MP and that they have an MP in the family. Madam Deputy Speaker, as has been said before during this debate, black history is British history, and my place here would not be possible without the mother of the house, without the member from Brent East, and without all of the amazing black women in this house that have made it easy for me to be here. I have felt welcome in this place. I have not felt out of place. I have not felt as if I don't belong here, and that is only because of the astounding people that have come before me. So I will end very briefly, Madam Deputy Speaker, by saying that we must remember Black History Month every single year, because every year there will be a different thing to talk about and a different theme to pull out. And I would like us to, in this house, take time every single year to remember the contributions that black people have made to this country, people like my grandparents and all the other grandparents that have got members of Parliament now sitting on these benches. Thank you.
Kirstine Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And first of all, I'd like to congratulate all my honourable friends across the chamber who have made their maiden speeches today, particularly the members for Suffolk Coastal, who gave such a glowing recommendation for retirement options, so hopefully I won't be needing to think about that for a while yet. I'd also like to thank my honourable friends for the contributions so far in sharing their experiences, their stories and the meaning that they attach to Black History Month. We're here celebrating black changemakers, past and present, who have shone a light on racial injustice and helped to shape a more equitable and just future. From every corner of the UK and the world, there are untold stories which can offer us reflection and inspiration. And I have been a little bit preempted here by my honourable friend for Southend West and Lee. For my constituency, there is a little known story, my constituency of Bathgate and Linlithgow, and I'm grateful to my constituent David for raising the matter with myself and my predecessor. So whilst I'm the first woman to hold the position of MP for most of the area covered by the new constituency, we can also claim the first black Scottish MP. So I want to bring the story of Mr Peter McLagan, MP, to Parliament as part of this debate. At the 1865 general election, Peter McLagan was elected as Scotland's first black MP to the constituency of Linlithgowshire, now mostly the constituency of Bathgate and Linlithgow. And to date, his portrait remains missing from the Pioneers Gallery in this place, something I hope to take up. Mr McLagan served continuously for almost 30 years, and he actually cut across social divides at the time, supporting women's suffrage and women's right to education, causes, as we know, that were very unpopular with his fellow members at that time. But nonetheless, Mr McLagan was a product of his time, his attitudes towards imperialism and the circumstances of his wealth, inherited from his plantation-owning father, a reminder of the honest conversations that we must have about our history. Yeah. And we must be willing to learn, to understand the past in order to challenge the racism and intolerance of today. Yeah. And we're all historians in that respect. Nearly 160 years later, there's still much to do to ensure that all our chambers are elected, all our chambers reflect the communities that we are elected to serve. And now on to the present. In Bathgate and Linlithgow, our black history is still being made. And I'm going to tell the story of an incredible black woman that I have been fortunate to know for several years now, Eunice Simpson. A woman originally from Ghana who has made her home in Blackburn, West Lothian. Now, Eunice always wanted to expand her horizons and do what she could to help women in particular. She wanted to build a network of support for those in need. But her life was turned upside down when in her final years of university, a fire ripped through her student accommodation, destroying her possessions and savings, leaving her future up in the air, or so she thought. Because Eunice is not a woman to be defeated. When she arrived in the UK, she immediately got to work, putting herself through the professional accountancy exams whilst working for charities across the Lothians. And now in the Bathgate and Linlithgow constituency, we are fortunate to have the West Lothian African Women's Network, founded by Eunice. It's a pioneering community project that supports black women to find their feet, to grow their businesses, to connect through culture and provide support to families. And it has been hugely inspiring to watch Eunice build this group with the support of many women from across West Lothian. And I can genuinely say that every time I meet her, we have a coffee, we have a conversation, I come away motivated, wanting to do more. There are many great initiatives, from business seminars through to Black History education sessions in local schools. From everybody involved, there is a real buzz around supporting one another and being each other's champions. And Eunice has reached beyond the African community in West Lothian by organising events that bring people together to celebrate our rich Scottish and African cultures. Her work to foster greater community cohesion and strengthen the bonds of sisterhood are a real testament to her passion and her drive. A month ago, West Lothian African Women's Network held their annual Africa Scottish Expo in Bathgate Town Centre, proudly displaying African culture at the heart of our hometown, with an opportunity to come together and enjoy music, food and dance. And we would welcome honourable friends to join us in celebration next year for the Expo in Whitburn. And I can confirm that the jollof rice is delicious and spicy. Also a month ago, Eunice, whose future once seemed so uncertain, became West Lothian's first black deputy lieutenant. Now, lieutenancies, featuring Scottish life for 300 years, are pivotal roles in grand ceremonies, bestowing honours and even permitted to fly the Scottish royal standard above their homes. It's a groundbreaking role for Eunice and truly well deserved, and it's a recognition of her hard work, her spirit, her courage, and it gives her the privilege of supporting the Lord Lieutenant in carrying out her role of representing His Majesty the King in West Lothian, covering much of our constituency. Eunice's story reminds me that Black history is still being made, and not just by Eunice, but by the hundreds of Black women supported by the West Lothian African Women's Network and many thousands of people across the UK. From Peter McLagan through to our history makers of today, it's a great privilege to be able to share these stories in this place and recognise the importance of Black History Month. With government's commitment to breaking down barriers, boosting opportunity and ensuring that equality is at the heart of every mission, we can tackle structural inequalities and pay gaps in housing and health outcomes and so much more. We all have a part to play to ensure that the injustices of the past are not part of our future.
Yeah. Calvin Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to thank and congratulate my right honourable friend from Bath and Bathgate and Linlithgow and the story that she has shared about Peter McLachlan. It's an important one, and it's one in which, and it's a campaign in which I will enjoy supporting her see through. I also want to point back to my right honourable member for Newcastle-under-Lyme, and he will enjoy reading Hansard when he learns of his admission that I look 15 years younger than him.
Better that way.
Indeed. Madam Deputy Speaker, Black History Month has its roots in this country in a powerful vision of education and empowerment. In 1987, Akiaba Adesayabu and Ansel Wong, staff at the Greater London Council and Ghanaian and Trinidadian, respectively, recognised a pressing need. Black British children were facing an identity crisis. They were reluctant to identify with their African heritage and shrank back when called an African. This realisation sparked a movement to create time and space to challenge racism and, importantly, to recognise and educate and reflect on the invaluable contributions of Black Britons to our nation's history and its culture. The history of Britain is incomplete without acknowledging the profound contributions of ethnic minority communities.
Would my right honourable friend give way?
I do indeed.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I just ask my honourable friend to agree with me about the importance of that changing narrative of some of the organisations within our own communities that do exactly that. For example, in mine, we have People Dem Collective, Everyday Racism and Margate Black Pride, which are putting the stories of black people in our constituencies on the map. They are the ones that are telling me that with the modern curriculum review, we need to be making sure that indeed black history isn't just about black people, but is everyone's history, and that should be a complete part of that curriculum.
Times. Interventions need to be short. She is going to have the opportunity to make a speech in due course. Calvin Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you for the very powerful intervention. Slightly criminal, but the important and necessary allyship of those organisations, because it is fundamental that we empower them and help them to lift others up, as our other right honourable member made clear earlier, because their stories are not footnotes, but integral chapters in our national history. From Claudia Jones, pioneer of the West Indian Gazette and the Notting Hill Carnival, to Paul Stevenson and Roy Hackett, who led the Bristol bus boycott in 1963, but also of Laurie Cunningham, the first black-capped English football player from our very own Leyton Orient. British history is enriched by the lives and contributions of people of colour. To overlook these contributions is to erase a vital part of our collective history. And as the author Zadie Smith has said, when you erase people's history, you erase their humanity. Recognising black British history is essential for building a truly inclusive society, and it is in this spirit of inclusivity that I will carry on. Black History Month is an opportunity to recognise the diversity and interconnectedness of different people and cultures in shaping modern Britain. One of the most important aspects of this is remembering the long and proud tradition of black and Asian servicemen and women who have defended this nation with valour and distinction. As we know, soldiers from Africa, the Caribbean and the Indian subcontinent made significant contributions to Britain's war efforts in both world wars. And I want to remember, in particular, the contributions of our aviators, such as Squadron Leader Mahinder Singh Pooji, an Indian RAF pilot who flew RAF Hurricanes and Spitfires during the Battle of Britain. I'll also like to share the stories of the Jamaican squadrons and the pilots of the Caribbean, as we like to remember them. There were so many brave men and women like Mahinder and the pilots of the Caribbean who played a vital role in securing our freedom. Their contributions were crucial, yet often overlooked, and we will remember them next month on Remembrance Sunday. And many of our reflections around Black History Month over recent years have centred on the story of the Windrush generation. But what isn't always recognised is how intrinsically linked this history is with the history of the Royal Air Force. Many of those who arrived on the Empire Windrush and subsequent ships were not strangers to Britain in any sense. In fact, they were former RAF service personnel, returning to our country, the country they had defended just a few years before. And I wish to share with you some of the stories of some of these remarkable individuals so they are captured in our history. John Henry Smythe, MBE, known as Johnny, was originally from Sierra Leone. He volunteered for the Royal Air Force in 1939 and served as a navigator in 623, or Jamaica Squadron. Shot down over Germany in 1943, he spent 18 months in a Nazi prisoner of war camp before being liberated in 1945. After the war, Smythe worked at the Colonial Office, caring for demobilised Caribbean and African airmen. In a twist of fate, he was the senior officer on the Empire Windrush in 1948, when it was being used to take former personnel back to the Caribbean. Recognising the lack of job opportunities there, Smythe himself recommended that the men be allowed to return to the UK, a decision that marked the beginning of the Windrush generation. Smythe later became a barrister, Queen's Counsel and Sierra Leone's Attorney General. He died in 1992 at the age of 82. Sam King, MBE, was originally from Jamaica. Sam had served in the RAF during World War II. Joining in 1944 after responding to an advertisement in Jamaica's daily Gleaner newspaper, King arrived in Greenock, Scotland in November 1944, experienced a shocking temperature drop to just from 23 degrees C in Jamaica to 4 degrees C on his arrival. After 3 months of training at RAF Hunbury Moor in Filly, Yorkshire, he was posted to RAF Hawkenge near Folkestone, Kent, where he served as an aircraft engineer. King was later promoted and received further training at Locking in Somerset. He had several more postings, finishing his wartime service at Dishforth, Ripon, Yorkshire. After returning to the UK in 1948, Sam re-enlisted in the RAF, serving until 1953. Later in life, Sam became a driving force in the British Caribbean community. He co-founded the Windrush Foundation and became the first black mayor of Southwark in 1983. Sam died in 2016 at the wonderful age of 90. Having checked through Hansard, his contributions have rightly been recognised before by several parliamentarians in this place, and the other who had the honour of being his best friend. Prince Albert Jacob, known as Jake, was born in Trinidad in 1925 and volunteered for the Royal Air Force at 17 years of age in 1943. During World War II, Jake repaired planes in America and in England, serving at bases in Kirkham, Burton Wood and Carlisle, in 1948, he married his wife Mary, an Englishwoman. Despite facing racial prejudice from her family, Jake settled in the Black Country and later in Knoll, building a life in post-war Britain. Although promised medals for his wartime service, Jake only received his War Medal, Defence Medal and Veterans Badge in February 2023, at the age of 97. A stark reminder of the often overlooked contributions of servicemen of colour. I had the pleasure of meeting Jake at the RAF 75th anniversary celebrations for the Windrush at Edgbaston in June 2003. And there is a rightly growing recognition of the Windrush's generation's significance in British history, but there is more we can do to permanently fuse this into our common understanding of who we are and where we came from. And I thank Micah, the RAF's Ethnic Minority Network, the historic branch, for sharing and preserving these stories, and to the Royal Air Force for lifting the black bar which allowed these people to serve for our country. These men and women made a conscious choice to return to Britain. They saw opportunities to use their skills to forge a better life for themselves and their families. Their decision was an act of agency, a deliberate choice to improve their circumstances whilst contributing to Britain's post-war recovery. This story of service, of migration and contribution resonates deeply with many of us. This was the conscious decision that my mother made to come to this country and to build a life for her family. I stand here, 47 years later, as a new MP, a proud Zambian and a Londoner with a decorated RAF career, representing my constituency as its first black MP. I aim to stand as a shining example of agency and of opportunity for all the young people in Leighton and Wanstead, contributing to our shared history alongside those from the Windrush generation who had RAF ties. And I want to finish by reflecting on what it means to have people who reflect so many strands of our national story now here in this place. From the pioneering Indian parliamentarian Dadabhai Naoroji, the Liberal MP for Finsbury Central in 1892, to the groundbreaking election of my honourable friend, the member for Hackney North and Stoke Newington, as our first black woman in 1987. We've seen significant progress. In 2010, there were 27 ethnic minority MPs. By 2019, this number had risen to 66, representing 10% of all MPs. As of July 2024, we stand at 90 MPs from ethnic minority backgrounds, of which, importantly, critically, 50 are women. Representation is about ensuring that diverse voices and experiences of our nation are heard in chambers where decisions affecting all of our lives are made. As we all celebrate Black History Month, let us recommit to ensuring that the diversity we see in our streets, in our workplaces and in all of our constituencies is reflected in these halls of power. Recognising this shared history makes it all the more crucial to address the Windrush scandal, which continues to demand redress. And I welcome my right honourable members for recognition and movement towards doing so earlier in her own speech. As we know, people with stories like Jake, Sam and John's were devastated just a few short years ago due to the policies and failure originating from this place. They lost their jobs, homes, access to healthcare, and in some cases their right to remain in the country they had called home. The Windrush compensation scheme was alarmingly slow and complex, and the compensation meagre. The Home Office's failure under the previous government to fully implement all recommendation of Wendy Williams' Windrush Lessons Learned review further compounds this injustice. As we stand here in 2024, it's clear that the Windrush scandal is not a closed chapter in our history, but an ongoing struggle for justice and recognition. And I welcome our renewed commitment to right these wrongs. And as we reflect on the Windrush generation's contributions and struggles, this is an opportunity to recognise the ongoing value of migration to our country. In communities like Leighton and Wanstead, and where I grew up, in Plumstead and Woolwich, we see the positive impact of immigration every day in our local buses, schools and GP services. From our family-run shops to dedicated new NHS staff, to the entrepreneurial people, to people links we have to fast-growing countries, our openness and interconnection with the world continues to enrich and strengthen our local areas and the nation as a whole. Managed... Absolutely.
Just make a brief intervention, and I thank him for letting me in this brilliant speech. Will he agree with me that our diversity is quite often our strength, and that in places like Burnley and Padiham and Briarfield, the diversity of our communities has provided people with a great sense of culture, community togetherness, and has brought a great level of economic growth to the towns as well?
Yeah. Absolutely, and I thank my right honourable friend for his powerful and significant intervention, and in particular, diversity is the strength of us 412 on these benches. Yeah. Managed migration brings skills, innovation and resilience to our workforce and society. The courage to leave one's home, the determination to overcome obstacles and the willingness to contribute and become part of a new society. These are qualities that have always strengthened Britain and will continue to do so today. In my view, this is about recognising the contribution from people from all of our communities, because our history is a rich mosaic reflecting countless cultures, experiences and contributions, from the Windrush generation to more recent immigrations, and from long-lasting minority groups to newcomers who now call Britain home. Black History Month must provide us with a vital opportunity for education and progress. These reflections are not always pleasant, and we must recognise our failings and injustices, such as my good friend Stuart Lawrence and his mother will tell you. Its challenges, Black History Month, challenge us to confront the whole truth about our past and to celebrate our achievements that were often overlooked, and renew our commitment to building a more just and inclusive society for the benefit of us all. Thank you.
Alison Gardner.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I would firstly like to congratulate all those members who've made their maiden speeches today, particularly that of Beckenham and Penge and his wish to advocate for people with disabilities. And I'm sure he and all members here today will want to add that we must consider the additional challenges that people in the black community have when they're living with disabilities. I would like to commend indeed all my honourable members for their contributions during this debate on Black History Month. I say that not just because I've enjoyed hearing their views on local histories, but because the very fact that this House considers Black British history today shows how far we have come as a nation. Now, that is not to say that we shy away from that complex past and the significant injustices, including that of the misdirected reparation mentioned by my honourable friend of Brent East, which, to my shame, I only learned about today as she spoke. Nor should we shy away from the challenges still faced today, including the shocking rate of maternal mortality rates in the black community mentioned by the Minister and my honourable friend of Luton North. But I want to use my contribution to highlight not just individuals, but the communities that have given so much to my constituency of Stoke-on-Trent South, Staffordshire and our country. And please indulge me as I speak about people and places that extend beyond the boundaries of my own constituency. The impact of the black British community spreads far beyond those lines drawn by the Boundary Commission. To begin with, I want to pay tribute to the many people of the Windrush generation who travelled an ocean to make their home in Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent, who not only helped to rebuild our nation after the Second World War, but continue to contribute to the diverse tapestry that is Britain in every field. And no mention of the black British history of Stoke-on-Trent would be complete without a mention of the great Doug Brown. initially training as a physiotherapist to support wounded World War II soldiers, as well as being the physio for the Great Potters, that Stoke City Football Club, to my honourable friends. Doug went on to give his skills to our NHS before a 20-year career in Stoke City Council, twice serving as Lord Mayor, meeting everyday people and monarch alike, treating all with candour and humility. Doug Brown was a proper Stokey. I feel a statue coming on there.
Will my honourable friend give way?
Yes.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. Doug Brown's son, Martin, lives in my constituency of Newcastle-under-Lyme, and she'll have my full support in the campaign for statue for genuinely a trailblazer and a history maker in North Staffordshire.
Thank you. I would also like to take a moment to thank my honourable friend, the member for Newcastle-under-Lyme, for inviting me to the Staffordshire Black Business Network's great event the other week at Keele University. This event, more than just a great evening, highlighted not only the contributions of the Afro-Caribbean community to our local economy, but also the importance and value of spaces that offer solidarity and recognition. I met Paul and Jonathan Smith from PPE for CIC in Mere, who empower young people from low-income backgrounds and upskill them, sourcing opportunities for those ambitious young people to be the next wave of great entrepreneurs in Stoke. And that is the crux of what this month is about: education, recognition and celebration.
Will my honourable friend give way?
Yes, certainly.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Would she agree with me that a crucial part of reclaiming the narrative, which is the theme of Black History Month, is in celebrating historic citizens of our own constituencies? And would she join with me in celebrating Oluda Equiano, who set out his powerful contribution in his autobiography of 1789? He spent many of his days in both the City of London and in Westminster, finally passing in Paddington Street with me, and will she join me in celebrating his life and looking forward to ongoing celebration of the powerful contribution he's made to our democracy right here?
Here. Very good point.
I most certainly will, and thank you for your fantastic intervention. I was still saying that work takes more than just 1 month. From Monyen Stone's work with the Staffordshire Film Archives to produce a documentary preserving the memories and voices of the elder generations of Windrush and their experience in Stoke and Staffordshire, to those institutions such as the Ahmed Iqbal Ullah Race Centre and the Black Cultural Archives, I believe has been previously mentioned, for whom the maintenance and education on Black British history is a year-round job, performed by people from every background. And that act, the act of celebrating and acknowledging Black British history, shall be a shared endeavour, just as the part the Black community has played in this nation has been just that, a shared endeavour. And that is why I chose to speak today. To celebrate another community's history and culture and contribution should never be the exclusive responsibility of that community. It lies with us all. Just as this country's past was written by a multitude of peoples, so too will its future. I say let us celebrate each other, understand our differences and embrace them. That is Britain at its best. I would like to end this speech by looking back to an individual who's become a running theme in my addresses to this House, Josiah Wedgwood. Josiah understood that the fight for liberty and the work of racial equity was the responsibility of all in this country. His famous anti-slavery medallion graced the clothes of thousands across these aisles, not sold for profit, but given for free. That understanding that Josiah had, that the onus of looking after your neighbour, fighting for them and when necessary, and celebrating them when possible, this is a spirit I want to share of our great nation, our great and diverse nation in the House today.
Shadow Minister Mims Davies.
Didn't realise that was on. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Gosh, that went quickly. May I, with leave of the House, Madam Deputy Speaker, respond very gratefully on behalf of His Majesty's official opposition. I have been truly grateful to listen to so many heartfelt points, views, important history lessons, and members champion issues and giving insights and showing great work of their tireless community champions across this House. There are so many reasons to be optimistic for the future of this country, and the lives of black people within our own constituencies are absolutely reasons to celebrate. And I do welcome once again the Minister confirming the update on the Windrush unit, the new Windrush voice, and the a focus on honouring the contributions and addressing the redress. And again, pay tribute to the Honourable Lady from Brent East, who sounds like she's as good at ironing as I am. Great excuse, get your friend to help. But she spoke beautifully and powerfully as ever, and I enjoyed hearing her beautiful poem. The Honourable Gentleman from the Liberal Democrats, so congratulations to him as the first black Lib Dem MP. And he spoke importantly about enriching the diversity of this place, and Councillor Jenny Williams from his constituency, a trailblazer like many we heard of this afternoon, and highlighted the most ethnically diverse Parliament ever, which we have all celebrated this afternoon, and mentioned Lord Woolley, who I've had the pleasure of working with, and his focus on social mobility. And my time at DWP, it was an honour to get to know him. Margaret and Godfrey from the Tea Room, Madam Deputy Speaker, have made an appearance rightly across this chamber, but he's not in his place at the moment, but our excellent Sergeant-at-Arms was listening, and there's another gentleman in his place at the moment, but he's another true trailblazer in this House. Nigerian-born with Sussex links, he is our first black Sergeant-of-Arms appointed in 2019, and we're delighted to have him. The Chair of the Women and Equality Select Committee this afternoon spoke movingly about the importance of intersectionality and addressing those issues, and it gives me the opportunity to pay tribute at the box to Helen Tomlinson, the first cross-government DWP menopause employment champion. There is a new champion in town, but she has some very fine shoes to fill, and that work reflecting black women's experience both in menopause and, as we've heard, around a pregnancy and birth is very important. The Honourable Member from Huntingdon, my friend, spoke about a personal love story which overcame prejudice. He also mentioned that there was a lot of football mentioned this afternoon, and there are heroines all across singing and artistry and culture, and it gave me a chance to mention one of my heroines, the amazing Beverly Light. What a talent she is. Had the pleasure of meeting her many moons ago in a different guise. But my honourable friend from Huntingdon did a thought-provoking speech, speaking about the powerful importance of role models, and that race need not, in modern Britain, be any kind of barrier to success, and we all celebrate this afternoon. May I congratulate the new member for Beckenham and Penge, the new constituency, on his maiden speech, mentioning Baroness Benjamin, an icon from the screens growing up, and spoke about being stronger together, and highlighted the disability employment gap and the lack of sporting opportunities. My dad was disabled for over 25 years, and I recognise much in what he shared with the House, and may I wish him well in his new position. And also mentioned David Bowie, which is always a good thing to hear. The Honourable Lady from Brighton Pavilion spoke about her Brighton and Hove Black History Group and the importance of black voices and black authors. She's not currently in her place, but she also talked about an unsolved murder and the heartfelt family impact of that, and I wish her well in finding answers. The Honourable Member for Birmingham and Erdington talked about the power of hard work and determination and being a child of the Windrush generation, and wanted to celebrate rightly black trailblazers and the progress that's been made, and mentioned one of her local trailblazers as well, and she has truly made her mark in this place. And spoke about the importance of Mary Seacole and dismantling those barriers being the guiding message, which I think we all agree with. The Honourable Member for Southend East and Rochford spoke about the importance of mentors once again, being the first black MP for his constituency, the importance of black pioneers and black excellence when it comes to music, and the importance of economic prosperity for all. And I think we can truly agree with that one. In terms of another important maiden speech, the new member for Burton and Uttoxeter talked about the weaving of the fabric of black history into daily lives and the importance of school councils. Congratulations, Mrs Hunter, on what she has done for the Labour Party, and he will continue to do. And may I welcome him to this place. And there's a second speech on Monday, potentially on veterans and service that he can crack on with, making his mark in this House with. The Honourable Member for Southend West and Lee, the celebration of change makers, the human form of the UN, I absolutely love that. Spoke about being an actor, but also talked about the importance of tackling online racism, and I think that was incredibly important. And as the Slavery Museum that he spoke about comes forward for 2028, the opportunity for us to celebrate universal suffrage and that struggle that unites us is very important. I congratulate him on an excellent speech. In terms of another maiden, may I welcome the new member for Suffolk Coastal. The Right Honourable Dame Therese Coffey was my boss previously, and I enjoyed working with her. But the new member there spoke very movingly about the impact of dementia. Neither my mum or dad knew that I came to this place. I cannot imagine the pain of having your mum here but not by your side in this journey, and may I wish her very well in this place. It was a heart-wrenching and poignant contribution, a first contribution, of very brave, and congratulate her on her success. My mum indeed was from Newcastle-under-Lyme, so the Honourable Member for there spoke. Oh, of course I will.
That is excellent news, and I look forward to taking the Honourable Lady for a cup of tea so I can get the lowdown. But can she tell us where in Newcastle-under-Lyme her mother had the benefit of being from?
Well, originally she was found on the steps of the local vicar, and she was a foundling. I don't think I've ever admit that, actually. So, yeah, you prized that out of me today. But very importantly, he spoke about the ladder of opportunity. And also there's been conversations this afternoon about being confused for other members. May I assure my colleagues that I'm often confused. I always like to think it would be for Kim Wilde or Debbie Harry, but it's not. It is. I have modelled myself somewhat on that. You may have noticed, but it's actually for the Right Honourable Member for Staffordshire Moorlands. So there you go. I thought I'd better share that this afternoon. I couldn't be more pleased about it, especially because she's a right on. Moving on to the member for West Bromwich, talked about Big Ron and the Baggies, the trio skillful black players, and about barrier breaking. And, of course, about Hyacinth, another local hero who changed the world of black hair care locally. We all need a good hairdresser. Thank goodness for Hyacinth. And in a run for the money, the Honourable Lady for Croydon East tried to claim the Human United Nations tag. I think there's a definite competition here. And talked about the input that her grandparents made after that call for help, and that was reflected very strongly in many contributions. The Honourable Member for Bathgate and Linlithgow, I've got it nearly there, spoke about the first black Scottish MP in 1865. Truly fascinating, and that 30-year career focusing on equal suffrage and women's suffrage as 2028 comes up. So poignant. The member for Leighton and Wanstead also spoke about black history being vital to highlight in shaping modern Britain, again reflecting people of colour and black soldiers who've contributed so much, and the story of Jake and being recognised so late in his life. But it was a powerful story of those who serve and come to this house as well to serve. And of course, we then heard again from another Stokey, which I was pleased to hear about the Staffordshire Black Business Network. Incredibly important to have access to cash and learnings and working from, to have those mentors to work with, which lets me turn to my closing remarks. A gentleman called Miles Stacey, in his time when we were in government at Number 10, who did a huge amount of work on social mobility, inclusion, access to cash and smashing the glass ceilings. And I hope the new government will continue to build on his work. And the former member from this end, the Right Honourable Member for Maidenhead, all of her work around race disparity. And in fact, the Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities concluding that Britain is truly a model multi-ethnic society. More to do and more to build on. I don't want to paint an overly optimistic picture or disregard any long-standing issues, but it's really important to recognise that any country can see further progress, and this side of the House will always work incredibly hard to make sure that we see all the progress that we want for all of our communities. And as the Honourable Member for Brent East said so well last week, Black history is British history, and I'm so pleased to have been sharing in this debate, this general debate which has been held in government time, which has been inspired by her once again. Today has been truly a reflection of the finest times in this House, which often delivers inspirational, collegiate and determined group conversation and debate, reflecting our communities, our strengths together, celebrating difference alongside the bonds that truly bind and unite us. Thank you.
Minister, Seema Malhotra.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it is a pleasure and an honour to close today's debate and indeed to follow the Shadow Minister, whose our paths have crossed on a number of occasions in recent years, and also to thank her for her contributions in today's debate and her very, very powerful summary of the debate today, which I won't repeat, but I do support everything that she said. I also want to thank my honourable friends, the members for Erith and Thamesmead and Brent East, for their openings and also the inspiration for today's debate, and I'm incredibly proud that this is the first Black History Month debate that is being held in government time in the Chamber, and long may that continue. The Shadow Minister has said that this has been an example of the House at its best, and I believe that. I believe it has been one of the finest debates I have heard in a long time, and I think we can probably all agree that we have all learned something new today. And I want to also pay tribute to our colleagues who have made maiden speeches today. The Honourable Member, my honourable friend, the Honourable Member for Beckenham and Penge, I will say that that was a very, very star-studded Labour history that he outlined in his speech, and also he gave a very, very powerful and moving story of his own experience, which I know has moved the whole House. And I am sure that it will be with great pride that all of those great Labour figures and also all his predecessors, great pride that they will have in him taking his place in this House and now being a very powerful voice for those with disabilities and particularly children. If I could also pay tribute to my honourable friend, the honourable member for Burton and Uckfield, who I thought it was a very humorous but powerful speech also, and I think told a story of family and of service in many different ways, and it is clear that he is also a living tribute to the last Labour government and what we sought to see in terms of opportunity for all. And I think that he was very clever in how he talked about his campaign to improve the roads
in his constituency, whilst the Roads Minister was present to hear his advocacy. And my honourable friend, the honourable member for Suffolk Coastal, again, an incredibly powerful speech, and I think walked us around Suffolk Coastal, I think taking in the sense of nature and biodiversity, a strong sense of her drive in her politics, but also the extremely powerful story of her experience as a carer for her mother, and someone who has had that responsibility for my mother. I can understand how much of a challenge that continues to be, and I'm sure that she will make an incredibly powerful contribution in this House for support for those with dementia and their families. If I can also pay tribute to the Honourable Member for Eastbourne and congratulate him also on his achievement in this House for the Liberal Democrats. And he started the, I think, the recognition of staff in this House with Margaret and Godfrey, and I think we've also had Ugbano Oyata's Sergeant at Arms reference, and I do think that that is an indication, Madam Deputy Speaker, about how we think about this whole House and about the pride that we have in now having the most diverse Parliament, but also in how we look to and share the opportunities for careers in this place in every part of its work. And I do believe that this debate is also and having it in government time, is a mark of how the new Labour government is putting equality at the heart of all we do. And I am proud to have been appointed as the Minister for Race Equality in our Equalities team, alongside my responsibilities as the Minister for Migration and Citizenship. Madam Deputy Speaker, since the 1980s, we have celebrated Black History Month, and it has moved from the fringes to the mainstream across our schools, our colleges, and our workplaces. Our understanding of history is constantly evolving as new scholarship reveals new stories and narratives, reveals new truths, and enhances our understanding of the experience of the Black community in the UK. The speeches from across this House, from colleagues including the members for Luton North, Huntingdon, Brighton Pavilion, Birmingham Erdington, Southend East and Rochford, Southend West and Lee, Newcastle-under-Lyme, West Bromwich, Croydon East, Bath Gate and Linlithgow, Leighton and Wanstead and Stoke-on-Trent South are also ways in which we have enhanced our understanding in this House through their stories and the stories of their constituencies and constituents. These stories are important because they teach us about ourselves and our national story. And the purpose of Black History Month is to amplify Black history, not confine it to 4 weeks. This is the story of all of us. The UK has a unique history, a unique set of global relationships and identities built on our shared language, our trade, our cultural heritage, and our shared history. And we must be honest about our history. We must confront the difficult truths about the transatlantic slave trade, about colonialisation, about racism at home and abroad. My parents were immigrants, Madam Deputy Speaker, coming to the UK in the 1960s. Both had been refugees as young children. We grew up above our family shop in Hounslow, a family of 8 with 3 generations living together. This was the time of the National Front, and racist comments regularly experienced as we went about our daily lives. Their community values, their compassion, their commitment to neighbours and pride in Britain contributed to me becoming the first woman ever elected to the constituency of Feltham and Heston, where I grew up, and also becoming the first female Punjabi origin MP in the House of Commons. Now, we have made progress, and indeed it was the Race Relations Act of 1968, introduced by a Labour government, that made racial discrimination illegal in employment, housing and public services. Recent scholarship about the British Empire has helped our appreciation and understanding, because we must understand the past in order to navigate the future. Black History Month allows us to hear the voices of millions of Black Britons down the centuries, and we celebrate some of the greatest, the trailblazers, the campaigners, the innovators, the pioneers. From Ignatius Sancho to Auloda Equiano, who is also mentioned today, from Chartist William Cuffey to Mary Seacole, from Walter Tull to Claudia Jones, also mentioned today, from Bill Morris to the Right Honourable Member for Hackney North and Stoke Newington and the Baroness Lawrence of Clarendon. Icons, leaders, change makers of their time, as indeed are all the contributions made by Black and minority ethnic communities to our politics, our public services, our NHS, our business and industry, our armed forces, our sports, in fact, every aspect of our public life. And I'm incredibly proud that we have the most diverse Parliament on record, and also with more women elected in this House than ever before. Now, Honourable and Right Honourable members across this House have raised a number of issues. We have covered some, and I will cover a few further. But let me just mention a couple of issues. One is the point made very powerfully by the chair of the Women and Equality Select Committee about intersectionality. In our Labour manifesto, we committed to strengthening protections against dual discrimination, and we will do this by bringing the dual discrimination provision in at Section 14 of the Equalities Act 2010 into force. People hold multiple protected characteristics, and we acknowledge that some people experience discrimination due to a combination of these protected characteristics, and I know that you too have done very important work on this in the past, Madam Deputy Speaker. Today I also want to recognise the important work that Wendy Williams has done through her Windrush Lessons Learned review, which exposed systemic injustices as a result of previous government's actions. The Windrush scandal saw Windrush and Commonwealth communities who had and have the right to live in this country victimised because they were unable to prove that right through no fault of their own. As my honourable friend, the member for Erith and Thamesmead outlined, today the Home Secretary, in a written ministerial statement, has updated the House on the government's progress in fulfilling our manifesto commitments to the Windrush generation to ensure that they receive the support they deserve quickly and efficiently. The Home Secretary, Madam Deputy Speaker, is also at a Windrush stakeholders roundtable this afternoon at the Black Cultural Archives. And additionally, we are reigniting the vital transformation work from the Windrush Lessons Learned review to embed lasting changes in how the department serves all communities. While in opposition, we also made it clear that the Windrush scandal must never be repeated. The last government's response was far too slow, far too weak, and did not deliver justice to those who were betrayed and failed. That's why I'm also proud that we will appoint a Windrush Commissioner, an independent advocate for all those affected, who can represent the views of the Windrush communities and victims at the highest government levels. This role will oversee the compensation scheme's delivery, implementation of the Windrush Lessons Learned review recommendations, and act as a trusted voice for families and communities. And for many, filing a claim can be intimidating and requires them to revisit past traumas. That's why we're injecting 1.5 million into a programme of grant funding for organisations to provide essential advocacy and support for applicants who need additional help with the application process. I will also reference in response to a question in the debate that we have also brought in a new single caseworker process which was implemented in July, and this was in direct response to stakeholder and victim feedback and has streamlined the process, improving consistency, increasing transparency and removing duplication that led to avoidable delay. This will give clarity and consistency to applicants so they know who is dealing with their case throughout their process. And as promised, we have re-established a Windrush unit in the Home Office dedicated to driving forward the action needed. The new unit stands ready to support the Windrush Commissioner when appointed. Because we are determined to ensure that the renewed work drives enduring change that matters to the Windrush community and has wider impact across the whole department and across government. Last month, I also had the privilege of visiting the National Windrush Museum with Director Denise Ledette, a new institution dedicated to collecting and preserving the stories of the Windrush generation. The passion of those I met, including Windrush pioneers, is matched only by the lasting impact I know the museum and their deep research and these stories will have on future generations. And I also look forward to attending the Windrush National Organisation Conference tomorrow. Madam Deputy Speaker, we stand on the shoulders of giants, and we do so to build a better future and a more inclusive future for all. I'm proud that our Equality, Race and Disability Bill will mandate ethnic pay gap reporting for large employers, helping to tackle inequalities discrimination in the workplace. Our Employment Rights Bill, which we introduced within the first 100 days, will end exploitative practices and enhance employment rights. And as this debate has demonstrated, there is much more to do. We must take urgent steps to close the maternal mortality gap. We must equally address the fact that black people are up to 5 times more likely to be stopped and searched by police than their white peers, or 3.5 times more likely to be detained under the Mental Health Act. We must also take urgent action to address inequalities in housing, employment and education, all too often disproportionately affecting black and minority ethnic communities. We are working through introducing our Renters' Rights Bill, our Employment Rights Bill, our Equality, Race and Disability Bill to address these issues, and we will work closely with businesses and workers on developing and implementing our commitments. And we are working at pace across government to develop and deliver wider proposals to address persistent racial inequalities wherever they arise. We have put this work at the core of our ambitious, mission-based programme to change this country, so that whoever you are, wherever you grew up, wherever you come from, if Britain is your home, Britain is a country that will value your contribution. It is where you belong, and we will ensure opportunity for all to achieve their ambitions. To quote David Olusoga, "Black British history is everyone's history and is all the stronger for it." Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered Black History Month. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.